Ooh. Okay, so it's Merry Christmas from me. Normally, when I do a Christmas live stream or a Christmas video, I'm wearing the Christmas hockey jersey, but it's buried under a load of junk, so I need to wash it. So I haven't washed it, so there we go. But Merry Christmas from me. Uh, fair bit to discuss. Fair bit to discuss. Um, Obviously, Premier League and most sports are on their Christmas breaks right now. So a lot to discuss. And the team normally bottom at Christmas in the Premier League is normally relegated. So that'd be Sheffield United this year with 9 points. Can we see if Sheffield United stay up? Obviously, Steve Cooper was sacked by Nottingham Forest, replaced by Nuno Espirito Santo. They lose the first game, which he has in charge, and Luton win the first game since that sacking took place. So Luton are now 2 points behind Nottingham Forest in the league. Everton obviously are still involved in that relegation battle in the Premier League, and there's lots going on in the background. Manchester United, so Jim Radcliffe has now completed his 25% takeover of the club. He's bought a 25% stake, and the Ineos Group are now in charge of sporting operations at Manchester United. Pity he's not in charge of catering operations, because now they've been given the lowest catering, the 5-star rating. They've been given 1 star. So Man United on the pitch is a disaster. Off the pitch, it's a disaster. With Jim Radcliffe getting on board and investing, will that change the direction of how things play out at Old Trafford with the Red Devils? We shall have to wait and see. That's a watch this space. Obviously, his takeover stake. Obviously, in time, he wants to take a full controlling stake over the next couple of years. We'll have to see how that plays out. Now, football news that I think is the biggest discussion point is the European Super League. The European Court of Justice has got involved, and they basically said UEFA and FIFA were a bit naughty in fining and punishing clubs for being involved in the European Super League. But basically, it means the way UEFA and FIFA acted and the various domestic leagues acted was unfair. However, it hasn't completely greenlit the idea that European Super League will actually happen, although they're saying, oh, it will happen by 2025. From statements given by the majority of clubs, however, I can't see what clubs Real Madrid and Barcelona can get on board without real resistance from leagues and fans with other means. They're Real Madrid and Barcelona. The only reason why they're actually doing this is because they've run out of money, and the Spanish central government can't bail out Real Madrid via the royal family, and the Catalonian regional government can't bail out Barcelona anymore because of spending rules. So these clubs, if they were standalone clubs which didn't elect club presidents, which had owners in charge, they would be bankrupt. They would be in liquidation. They would be docked points every season for breach of financial rules. So when people say, "Oh, these clubs are too big to go bust," no, they're not. They're the only reason why the European Super League idea is clinging around is because these 2 clubs are so heavily indebted. They need to make money somehow. But with only 2 clubs openly agreeing to sign up to this Super League format, I can't see how it's going to work. Well, the Australian netball players, there's a lot going on with Australian sports where players aren't overly happy with how their sports or the leagues that they play in are operating. I think that's fair. I don't know enough about the netball players. I'm just taking my shoes off because I've had my shoes on all day. Just got back from Christmas dinner at my mum's, and I'm a bit vegetated at the moment. A bit vegetated. Oh, there we go. Let's get comfy. I haven't really looked into what's going on with the Australian netball players, but I do know that there's been a lot of disunity, I think, in professional sports across the world in regards to a lot of things that leagues are doing, or sports are doing, or governing bodies are doing, where it leaves a lot to be desired. And there seems to be at the moment a shift in attitudes in a lot of areas in regards to sports governance, revenue sharing, players' associations wanting to have full union status, player welfare concerns, balance of payments, escrow. There's a lot of things going on. Let me just have a quick look at the Australian netball players and what exactly is going on. Obviously, netball is not one of those sports that I follow particularly closely, um, but it's netball. Australian netball. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at the news. Netball. They've been stripped of funding. So there's 18 million Australian dollars. That has netball has been stripped of 18 million Australian dollars in government funding amid a pay dispute with players. So the funds that were set aside have been redirected to other sports. So that would be like AFL and NRL with their women's equivalents, and those grassroots, that soccer, the Matildas, the Socceroo, women's football team. So netball has been stripped of nearly 18 million Australian dollars in federal government funding after a key proposal to the Australian Sports. This is back in November. This is like a month ago. Australian Sports Commission was deemed not satisfactory. There is a pay dispute that is basically crippling the sport. The sports minister at the time confirmed the money was no longer set aside for netball and would be redirected to a general caveat, a general pool for women's sport in general. Netball could still access funding through a competitive tender process, but other sports will also be allowed to pitch for it. So let's say women's rugby league and women's Aussie rules, for example, women's football, soccer to Australians. They will also be going for this tender process to get funding for grassroots projects as a thing. So there was, back in 2019, there was an election pledge by the Liberal-led government of 30 million Australian dollars at the time. And that at the time would fund numerous initiatives from grassroots to high performance, strong and long-term future for the sport. Because women's netball in Australia is actually very, very good quality. They've got a very, very good talent pool and player base. They're very, very competitive, and they do win a lot of championships that the Australian team, Commonwealth, World Championships, World Cups, that they enter. Now, 12 million Australian dollars has been used on programs, including digital initiatives and a successful bid to host the Netball World Cup in 2027. So they've earned the right to be a World Cup host, which is very, very important because that brings money in. The Sports Commission has been seeking a formal submission from Netball Australia for funding for 18 months. It was received 6 weeks ago. The business case was not sufficiently robust, so there's got to be a business case where they're going to make this money back, or how they're going to spend the money and how they're going to earn money. There's 4 million anyway that's given from federal funds, and there's also further funding. And that was a month ago, so let's get out of that. 2 weeks ago, they ended the pay dispute. They would get 11% base increase on their salaries, so they're 11% increase. They'll also get back paid to October the 1st. So this was midway through the month. They had not been paid since the expiration of their last contract. So these players were not getting paid. Now, acceptable. So this dispute obviously had been going on for quite a while. They did have a collective player agreement at the time. They allowed it to lapse. There's an three-year, basically CBA, collective bargaining, as we would call it. They call it a collective player agreement down under. They got 11% increase in pay and a 20% revenue share for players on above an agreed sponsorship forecast. So they basically got some pay rises. They hadn't been paid since the end of September, so that's troubling. They had gone 3 months without pay. Not good enough. Now, the CEO of Netball Australia had to resign. They've got an interim CEO in place. So it's basically been a bit similar to what's going on with Rugby Australia, really. And so basically, sports governance in Australia is a shambles. The AFL has still got to replace Boffin. He's still interim, even though he stood down officially as head of the AFL over a year ago. He's now interim. He hasn't actually left yet, even though he's not actually the boss anymore. He's just there. So the AFL's got a lack of leadership. Rugby Australia's a mess. Netball Australia's a mess. It seems that rugby league seems to be the best run sport in Australia because it's just a mess down under. What sporting events am I looking forward to next year? Well, I'm looking forward to the next Asian Le Mans Series race. I think it's in Dubai, or that's at the beginning of February. That'll be a 6 hour. Is it a 6 or 4 hour race? I think it's a 4 hour race. That's looking interesting. So I'm looking at to the conclusion of the Asian Le Mans Series. I'm looking forward to the European Le Mans Series. I'm looking forward to the World Endurance Series with multiple new hypercar teams. Alpine are back in the top class. Lamborghini have got a car. I think there's going to be some more customer Porsche teams as well. So there's a lot more hypercar teams. However, we are losing LMP2 and LMP3 completely from the grid. We've got the new GT class in the World Endurance Championship, which I think, apart from the Le Mans race, that's bad move by WEC. Personally, I am looking forward to the NRL games in Las Vegas. I know they've been very divisive, especially within NRL fandom in Australia and New Zealand. But I'm looking forward to the games in Vegas on the 2nd of March. And actually the time zoning as well, when those games kick off, that'll actually be a bit more viewable for myself for their kicking off in the evening in Las Vegas. So actually that'll be a bit more decent timings for us over here in Europe. I am concerned about the grading by the IMG for the Super League and Rugby Championship and League One. Because I'm a London Broncos fan, they could hypothetically win the Super League and the Challenge Cup and still get relegated in 2025 because they don't meet the IMG criteria. This is the problem which the RFL has because they've brought in some consultancy firm that does, event consulting and corporate consulting for how you PR and stuff. They don't have a clue about sports. They've been grading clubs. There's two Super League clubs, Castleford and the London Broncos, that don't meet their criteria to be in the top 12, even though they want to expand the league to 14. I mean, the Newcastle, whatever, is it Newcastle Thunder? Newcastle obviously go bust, they reform, and guess what? They've been regraded as they're the 18th biggest, 18th team on the grading, yet they've gone bust and had to reform. Do not understand how IMG are grading this. They're a consultancy firm. They've got no prior track record in sports that I can tell. This is shambles. So rugby league, they're also bringing in this new tackle rule for the community game next year, which is going to be a sack of shit because everyone's just going to stop playing the game, stop watching the game. Most players and fans say, if you are going to be serious on head contact, punish deliberate head contact. Don't change the tackle rules. They've always been the same. Why change them? I would say I'm looking forward to the Euros in Germany. It's going to be interesting to see how they play out. We know that Gelsenkirchen will be an alcohol-free stadium. So Schalke's home ground in Gelsenkirchen will be alcohol-free. It'll be interesting to see if the German organisers decide to have all the stadium areas and surrounding areas in the cities alcohol-free. They've obviously been looking at how the World Cup went in Qatar with controlled fan zones well away from the stadiums. They've looked at other World Cups where, again, controlled fan zones. They've also looked at the history of trouble with certain nations and the hooligan element. Not that the Germans are innocent in this, because Germany's got quite a big hooligan element. They've obviously looked at how alcohol impacts disorder, and they're being very tight on security. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. African Cup of Nations, I just think the African Cup of Nations is not as good a quality as people think it is. It gets hyped up a lot, and reality, the quality of play is not great. So there's that. Oh, the Lee Leopards. I don't know how the Lee Leopards can be graded so highly. I know they won the Challenge Cup. Their bosses, their owners spent a stupid amount of money. I can't see them being salary cap compliant. But it doesn't matter because what we're seeing is that the way the grading works is flawed. It favours a handful of clubs, so your Wigans, your Leeds, your St Helens. It therefore those clubs could basically never get relegated, even if they're absolutely shocking on the pitch next year. They'll be re-promoted. Let's just hypothetically say that St Helens or Wigan, Leeds have had a few rough seasons lately, but let's say Leeds, they have a shocking season. Warrington, they have a shocking season. They get relegated. They'll be promoted straight back up again because of the grading criteria. So they're not getting punished for being crap on the field because of reasons. Yeah, Castleford were pretty decent on-field product. They've been a Super League side for a very long time. They've been to a grand final. Then I don't know how this grading works. It is a shambles. It's a joke. The new tackle laws are a joke. Look what happened to rugby union with their World Cup. It was unwatchable at times. Not gonna lie, I was keeping a brave face on it. I actually felt some of the games were unwatchable. The quality wasn't great. I tuned out during the quarterfinals and the semi-finals to a point, so I didn't cover every single game. I didn't watch every single game. The way that the TMO was used was far too stop-start. Games were taking longer, and I do fear that both rugby codes are being far too reactionary rather than proactionary. The rules around the tackle area didn't need to change because high contact has always been high contact. And recently, the last few days, so this weekend, I've been rewatching this season's NRLW season because I subscribe to the NRL website, and therefore all the games are on full replay. And I've been watching some of the players tackling low, getting flattened, getting knocked out, tackling at a lower height because your knees and thighs and shins go in your head, you're out. And I've watched a few games where a player's gone low, which is what they're trying to encourage them to do, and has been knocked completely unconscious by going too low. And the way they worded the change in tackle height, you're going to see more players out cold, badly concussed, badly injured. It was always illegal to take an opposition player's head off. There's a reason why they got rid of the shoulder charge, because while it was legal for so long, we're basically blindsiding a player who was not expecting to get blindsided. So that was the right thing to get rid of the shoulder charge. People are saying it's going to soften the game up. It's going to make the game unplayable. It's basically going to make it touch rugby because it's offload after offload after offload. The point is of the 2 or 3 man tackle is to seal the ball up so the attacking player cannot offload the ball. You want to stop that second phase of play. Well, that's where line breaks come in. So what we're going to see is boring, one up, one up, one up, one up, or offload, 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 and it becomes touch rugby. And with the way the NRL have gone simply to Super League in a sense with the 6 again rule, you are going to see players just gassed. It is going to become like 9s or 7s. It's going to become very unwatchable. I don't think the RFL have thought this through at all. Rather than saying to referees, high contact, just send them off. And rather than the judiciary actually suspending players for decent suspensions but foul play, we get inconsistent refereeing and inconsistent disciplinary post-match discipline with the citing commissioner. That's what they had to fix. That's all they had to fix. They also need to get more independent doctors in, but that means spending money, which they don't want to do. They don't want to spend money. They're fearful of this lawsuit that ex-players have been encouraged, even though some of these ex-players themselves dished out lots of dirty hits to other players in the lawsuit. That's what's hilarious about this, is they were willingly knocking other players out deliberately with dirty plays, and now they're going, oh, we weren't protected. Well, you were getting away with dirty plays because the referees were gutless, and the league was gutless. All you had to do was, right, dirty play, you're suspended for 6, 7, 8 weeks. The longer you suspend them, the less likely they are going to keep doing it. Then find the players. Find the players hard. Didn't want to do that. They've been inconsistent with the suspensions. They've been inconsistent with the refereeing. The rules were always there. Now they're like, oh, we need to change the rules. Which you don't need to do. You just need to enforce the rules that already exist. It's not hard. It's all common sense. Rugby union's fouled up. Rugby union, all they needed to fix was the scrum, the TMO system, and actually sending players off for dirty foul play, which they weren't doing for 15 years because the refereeing standard has not been good enough. So they decided to make too many rule changes too often, which then leads to problems. And they keep coming up with these rule changes. Rugby league is let's copy rugby union, which is the worst thing you can possibly do. There's a reason why the sport's separated. There's a reason why the sport's different and enjoyable because they're different. And it's just becoming just really badly governed, really reactionary governance, which is the worst type of governance. You need more proactive governance where you just go, look, when a player has failed or even passed an HIA, there needs to be a follow-up cognitive test done. There needs to be, even if a player passes an HIA, there's a delayed concussion. If a player is deemed to have to require an HRA because of head contact, you just have to assume they're concussed. They should not return to the field of play. Simple. It is simple. It's called common sense. It has been known for a long time that head injuries probably aren't good for you. Just saying. It's been known for a long time, even without the CTE side of the science. It's been known if you keep getting blows in the head, it's not good for you. It's called being knock yourself silly. I just do not understand why common sense is not applied. But there we go. I do want to be excited for the Olympics, but the discontent surrounding the games and the security regarding what's happened in France in the last few years. Oh, look, I don't even care about the Olympic Games anymore. There's already an ongoing corruption investigation into the organising company, one of the infrastructure companies tasked with building the venues over misappropriation of funds. And this came at the same time that France pulled out hosting the Rugby League World Cup the following year because of shortage of funds. So I think this was a government decision going, oh dear, something's going wrong with the accountancy here. Money's missing, and etc. etc. So one sporting event gets punished because another one is crooked. It's France. Um, what this Olympics reminds me of, and looking back in history, even though I wasn't alive, is the '76 Olympics in Montreal. There was massive overspends, labour disputes, and corruption involved with the Montreal Olympics back in '76. It cost the Quebec government a lot of money, the regional government. It cost the federal government of Canada a lot of money. And it took a long time to pay off that debt. I think until the mid to late 2000s to pay off the game's debt in Montreal. Yes, Toronto and New York have pulled out. You're going to find that with a startup league. It generally does happen a lot in the US that you'll see teams disappear, new teams get founded, relocations, expansions. Um, the big talking point at the moment is what's going on with the Oakland A's and where they're going to be playing in the interim before they end up in Vegas and what's going to happen with whatever Vegas stadium they build. There is a minor league team in Vegas. They were looking at the possibility of playing games in the minor league stadium, which has a lot less capacity than a major league baseball stadium. Um, that's created a big discussion point. Big discussion point. Vegas fans don't want the Oakland A's. The league, the Major League Baseball has obviously ticked this off. Said, yeah, you can relocate. Um, the relocation must be no later than 2027. Um, Vegas, the whole thing with the Oakland A's, this has been brewing for a long time. This is a franchise that's moved multiple times in the past. It was the first Major League Baseball franchise or any Major League sporting franchise in North America to move 4 times, which will be a record that no one wants. It's a team, it's a franchise that's had a brief period of success, but for the most part has been a really bad team. Bad ownership. Um, and the debate around Vegas is we've not seen any plans for the new ballpark. They were meant to do some announcements over the last couple of months, but there's been a lot of other things happening in the Las Vegas area. Obviously, a lot of major things have happened. There's been a couple of tragic events. There's been a mass shooting. There's been 2 Nevada State Patrolmen killed by a hit and run, all within a few days of each other about a month ago. And they've delayed press conferences. They've delayed press releases and public events surrounding this, trying to build the brand in Las Vegas. And then they've got to compete with everything that's going on in Las Vegas. You've got the Golden Knights, which are obviously one of the best teams in the NHL right now. You've got the Oakland Raiders have moved to Vegas, now the Las Vegas Raiders, and they're settling into Allegiant Stadium. The NRL are going there. They've had their press day. You've got the Super Bowl beginning of next year in February. You've got the NRL games in Vegas at the beginning of March. What's the point? The problem is Oakland, I wouldn't say it's a small market area, but the Bay Area is a very congested sports market because you've got San Francisco, you've got San Jose, you've got Oakland, you've got Santa Clara, you've got a lot of big urban areas, big cities in a very small geographical area in central coast of California. What is the point turning up? I don't know. The ownership is part of the problem. The stadium is an issue. Oakland is one of the most deprived cities, obviously in California. There's a lot of social unrest in Oakland. There's a lot of social division in Oakland. It's a city with a lot of issues. It's also a city where sports teams go to die. The best way to describe Oakland. If you've got a sports team in Oakland, they won't stick around long term. The Raiders have moved out of Oakland a couple of times. The A's have had a very troubled existence in Oakland alongside the Raiders. The Raiders obviously moved out once, came back, moved again. Um, what's the point of Oakland fans turning up the games? The Oakland A's fan base feel very let down. Um, there's a lot of discontent with the fan base, and there has been for a long time. The team hasn't been very successful for most of its history, even though it's got great. I'm not a baseball fan, but it has actually got some great merchandise. I've got to admit, the Oakland A's merch is pretty quality stuff. It's iconic stuff. But you've got to remember, Oakland as a city have had the Golden Seals in the NHL. They are the California Seals, and they were the California Golden Seals. They've gone. They disappeared, relocated, and then folded. They've had the Raiders. They've moved twice. And now the Oakland A's, who've moved 3 times prior to getting to Oakland, are going to be moving for a 4th time. The lack of investment in the stadium infrastructure, because they're still using the Coliseum, which is really shocking stadium. It's in a poor state of repair. Um, it's an outdated facility, which is crumbling, much like the city. Um, it's a very congested market in the sense that you've got the teams based in San Francisco, you've got the teams based in San Jose, and various other sports. So it's a very, very congested sports market in that part of California. I don't know. I mean, some fan groups have said we should show up to every game, pack out the arena, the stadium. Other fan groups are saying boycott, hurt the owners more by costing the owners even more money, and embarrassing the owners more by protest. The thing is, the team isn't very good, so you're relocating failure. So that doesn't help when you're trying to sell to a new market, so Vegas. When you relocate a problem, relocating a failing team is not going to get new fans. Um, well, it's not just that. It's in Las Vegas. There's multiple fan bases because Vegas is a melting pot of a city because people from all over the US go there to relocate for a variety of reasons, and it is a bit of a tourism hotspot. So that's where the NHL and the NFL really work really, really well. Is when Vegas have got a home game, other fans will see that as their yearly trip to Vegas. So there'll be fans from other teams turning up and go, we'll treat this as our holiday, our vacation to Vegas. So 2, 3 day, 4 day holiday. They'll book some time off work and they'll go. Plus, because you've got people from moving all over the US and Canada and all over the world to Las Vegas, there's a lot of sports fans of other teams already in Las Vegas. So there's a lot of teams from Texas, California, and the Rocky states, the Rocky Mountains, and Arizona. So you've got Diamondbacks fans in Vegas. You've got fans from other sports leagues living in Vegas who don't support the Vegas teams. They support their home state or home city team from where they moved before, already there. So um, there are some Oakland A's fans who are living in Vegas, but they are outnumbered. And the only way it will truly work is if it is an expansion team. Quite really, realistically, relocation will not work. You're relocating a failing team to a new location. That's not going to bring in new fans. It's not going to get baseball fans in Vegas to go, you know what, I'll support this new franchise because it's not their team. You just give it your. They're not even, from what I can gather, they're not even going to change the name from the Athletics to the Vegas Aces. Would be fantastic. The Vegas Blackjacks or the Vegas Aces would be a fantastic name change. And if you call them the Vegas Aces, you could still have the A symbol, but in like a 4 aces or an ace of spades or an ace of diamonds, and you could have a logo with an A in it. The Vegas Blackjacks was one of the ideas for the Vegas Golden Knights as a name that was considered by the ownership at the time before they went with the Golden Knights. So they haven't trademarked that. It was just an idea that was shelved, and that idea is floating around. They decided not to rename the Raiders because the Raiders have a national fan base because Raiders Nation is nationwide because it's one of those cult fan bases where you could just put the Raiders anywhere and fans will support. But the issue is how badly drawn out and how badly handled this whole saga has been for a long time. There's been issues with the Oakland Coliseum for 30 years. This is not a new problem. Oh, Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball. I mean, look, I'm not a baseball fan. I've made that very clear. I have watched, obviously, some baseball games for the channel. Obviously, I've covered the London series and the pros, the good, bad, and the ugly, and the pros and cons, and where they get better and where they've learned from the past. And so I'm not a baseball fan because I just cannot enjoy the sport. I just cannot enjoy it. It's not a sport that hooks me in. Partly because I've got ADHD and I'm easily just like I lose focus. It's not keeping my attention. A sport that hooks me is a sport that can keep my attention with my if with ADHD. Obviously, you can get distracted. If a sport can keep my attention, like ice hockey, like rugby league, I'm going to love it. I will be hooked for the entire game without fail. Simple. Baseball, it's just so many nothing's going on. It's too stop. I mean, yeah, you've got the pitcher, you've got the batter. Now, ironically, a quick pitcher with not many home runs, ironically, is a quick game, but I find that, well, I want home runs. I want to see the fans get excited when the batter is just knocked out the park. It's more entertaining. But the game takes longer, which is weird. You would think it'd be quicker if the batter's just whacking everything out in that innings and it's just one home run after another, rather than the pitcher, pitching, curveball. However, because you've only got one batter, one pitcher, rather than a bowler in cricket, you bowl 6 balls and you might have multiple, two batsmen knocking in for runs all over the place. You have a very quick over with boundaries and singles. With baseball is much like American football. It's far too stop-start. It's too many stoppages and timeouts, and it can drag. Major League Baseball's got a lot of issues. It's the only major league without a salary cap. I don't class the luxury tax as a salary cap. I know there are some who do class it as a soft cap. It's not a soft cap. The NBA is a soft cap for the luxury tax. That's how a soft cap works. So you're going to have the haves and have-nots. There's no minimum salary limit. So some teams are literally putting out AAA sides because they want to tank for the best overall pick. Dreadful. There's a massive competitive imbalance. The Dodgers and the Yankees will spend billions of dollars on player contracts, whereas the Oakland A's, for example, who are all over the place right now, will spend hardly any money on a team and will be horrendous, either for tanking for draft picks or they're just generally horrendous because the owner doesn't want to spend money because there's no incentive to hit a salary cap floor. They don't have that. When it comes to sports, it's a very imbalanced sport when it comes to spending and player recruitment. Now, obviously, in our European leagues, we don't really have salary caps. As we talk about rugby union, to a certain extent, rugby leagues, so European football, obviously, the European leagues, there's no salary cap. So you will see some teams that do some really good recruiting, who get players for below market value and win titles and make things entertaining and have a brand. And you'll get players who then sign hometown discounts where they're not asking for massive salary extension, contracts, and will play for less money. But then you have to think of the transfer market, so there's that. But basically, an underdog story can happen more likely. It's just, but the North American system there's a hard cap system, so the NHL. There's a soft cap system, the NBA, and then you have the Major League Baseball system, which is a shambles. And there's a definite haves and have-nots, like the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox, and then you have teams like the Oakland A's. The Diamondbacks did really well on the budget. So if the Diamondbacks had won the World Series, we would have been having a different conversation about not spending money. But Major League Baseball's got a problem. It's got an aging fan base, a declining fan base, yet somehow it's making double the revenues of the NHL. I just don't understand how this league is making any money. Do not understand. They've had a lockout. They've had player disputes with the league. There's clearly a lack of trust between the MLB PA and the Commissioner's office. They've got some really bad owners in Major League Baseball, really bad owners. There is clearly a lot of issues at play. And, when you've got an aging, shrinking fan base, where the average age of a fan is in their 50s, who goes to games, um, and younger sports fans are looking at other sports and turning their backs on baseball, which then impacts the player pool of grassroots juniors and kids wanting to go to games with their parents, and wanting to play, you know, either softball or baseball. So that's women's softball, baseball's men. When you've got that lack of grassroots participation in the junior leagues and the minor juniors and AAA midgets, I love that AAA midget Pee Wee leagues. It does impact the minor leagues as well, and it impacts the collegiate system. It impacts a whole variety of things. And then you've got some teams dishing out contracts that are worth tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to players. Basically, I think the Dodgers dished out $1 billion worth of contracts for two players, which is ridiculous. Like, that makes no sense. Like, that is ridiculous that a team can, on two players, dish out $1 billion worth of contract. That is just mad. That just. You, I don't know enough about baseball viewership figures and demographics, but a rough survey done a few years ago before COVID was the average age of fans for various sports, various leagues in the US. Major League Baseball came out with the oldest fan base for average age. And of course, that demographic will shrink. And when you've got younger fans disconnected from a sport, that's a problem because that younger fan base is where your next generation of players is going to come from. And that is an issue. When you've got stagnating viewership, that is an issue. They're not marketing themselves particularly well. Obviously, the lockout was a bad PR period when players were boycotting Major League Baseball on social media. Then Major League Baseball boycotted those players and the image rights, and that became tit for tat. It's not a good thing. Will Leeds join the EIHL? No, their arena isn't big enough. Well, it might be. If the Guildford Spectrum is classed as a big enough arena, the potential's there, but would it be financially sustainable and viable considering Leeds have only been a nice hockey team for 4 or 5 years? Would it actually be a sustainable, viable option for the Leeds? Is it the Leeds Knights? Would it be sustainable and viable? We have seen teams go up that level. We just couldn't sustain the finances of it. So Basingstoke's a prime example. Hull had several teams go bust. See Newcastle, Manchester. We've seen teams take that step of saying, right, we're going to be an elite league team. Couldn't operate with the operating costs and didn't make enough money. The Edinburgh Capitals case lost money and were a shocking team for the best part of 2 decades. I don't think they've been around long enough and built up a fan base yet. They've got to build up, a strong local fan base. They've got to build the fan base. Look how long it took Guildford to become an elite league team, and look how long Basingstoke waited, and then they went up for 2 seasons, worked out. Wasn't for us. Milton Keynes the same. They went up, didn't last very long, wasn't a sustainable business model, and they dropped down a level very, very quickly, back down to what was the EPIHL, which is now the National League. The business model has to be there, and the state of. I know Leeds have got a brand new facility. It's one of the newest rinks in the country. It's a lovely facility, but have they got the business model to do it? Baseball, like cricket, is a dying sport. Baseball, ice hockey, and football is well. Basketball, ice hockey, and football is worldwide, and American football know how to sell themselves to the world. I wouldn't say cricket is necessarily dying. I think cricket's mismanaged. I think is more of the issue. When you've got a country like India with over 1 billion people, Pakistan with over 300 million people, you're going to have a lot of people playing and watching the sport. Problem is cricket is mismanaged and badly governed. Baseball just is not It just doesn't. Now, look, I watched the London Series games at the beginning of the summer, did my two match review on it, gave my thoughts. I felt game one was better than game two, although game two, the fans stayed for longer. There were a lot of empty seats, so fans leaving early. Um, and most of the fans that were interviewed apparently were Americans. So the American reporters managed to find every single American in East London on that weekend in June, July. It just so happened that everyone they interviewed was American, which was really interesting. I think the NFL has somehow managed to sell themselves overseas, somehow. Now, part of that was the London series. They got that to work. That could have been a massive failure. The games in London could have failed in 2007 and 2008, 2009, 2010. That could have been a very expensive failure. Had that not worked, uh, I think that changes the perception of the NFL massively. Because the NFL made a success out of the London series in the early days, it's created the catalyst for the games to take place in Germany and Mexico City. Now, there's a lot of issues with the games in Mexico City, and the NFLPA's raised concerns, players have raised concerns. They're not overly happy, but they're still going. Now, what also helps the NFL series in London and in Germany is a lot of the fans are local fans. Now, yes, there are a lot of Americans who live in Germany. About 120,000 Americans live in Germany. 300,000 Americans live in the UK. So there's a big expat community and a lot of military personnel in our here in the UK and in Germany that will also be going to games because they get discounts, armed forces discounts, armed forces spousal discount, um, and certain businesses have like corporate head offices in like Frankfurt, Berlin, London, Manchester, things like that. So there's a lot of Americans based over in parts of Europe for work and in the military, and there's a lot of retirees who may have a spouse who was either from the UK or Germany, whatever, who've decided to make their home here in Europe in their retirement. Um, Especially if they're military retirees, you'll be very, very surprised how many military retirees leave the US and move overseas. It's very interesting, it's a high number. So there's a big US expat community and overseas community for work and students already in the UK and Germany, which also helps when it comes to the NFL Europe games in London, Berlin, Frankfurt, Munich. Really helps. Um, Obviously, the NBA's got a pretty good following in Europe, especially the more further east you go, because a lot of the Eastern European, the best Eastern European and Balkan players end up in the US. We know this. Ice hockey, a lot of Scandinavian and Central European players end up in the NHL. Big following, obviously, in Europe. So again, got that expat community, and if you let's say live in Germany, but the games are taking place in like the Czech Republic, it's not that hard to get from let's say Munich to Prague. Takes a few hours on the train, ironically on the high speed intercity, so you're there. So yes, the NFL's done a very good job of marketing itself. It did have some assistance from the large American expat community in Europe, and then overseas nationals in Europe that helped. But as I said, back in 2007, there were a lot of concerns with that first game at Wembley that it wouldn't work, that the attendance would be poor, that the TV viewership on just the domestic audience in the US would not be great because of the time zone difference. They had to alter the time of day the games played. That locals wouldn't turn up. The local TV audience in the UK and Europe would be poor. Turned out it was good enough for them to come back in 2008, and they expanded the series from one game to two. It was a very, very brave decision that the NFL took. Now, the NFL had a roadmap plan that if in the early days it was a success, they were going to have a team over in London. And then the aftermath of the financial crisis and what we saw in the early 2010s, it didn't happen. It will never happen. People are going, oh, we'll have a team. The NFL will have a team. It will never happen. It won't happen. Other major leagues like the NHL have looked at having a team in the UK or a team in Germany or a team in France or a team in Scandinavia. They've looked at having a whole division in Europe, and it just does not work. It doesn't. The NBA's looked at it. The NBA has done the business model, and they've got it. It won't work. Cannot work. It won't work. It doesn't suit the timings for the TV networks in the US and the domestic viewership in the US and Canada. It won't work. Um, What, the T20 Cricket World Cup? It would help if there was more exposure on free to air coverage, because having it behind a paywall is not working. That's the problem with cricket. Is what it is seen as that stereotypical elitist sport, and that isn't always the case. There's a lot of working class lads who play the game. I mean, Freddie Flintoff and Steve Harmison would be kind of a hint that they're working class lads. I mean, Jimmy Anderson's from Burnley, probably the most working class town in this country. Um, so it's seen as that stereotypical, elitist upper middle class sport, a bit like rugby union. Seems very elitist. There's a stereotype there that it's not a working man's game, when in reality, a lot of the players are from working class background, especially the players from like Lancashire, Yorkshire, and Durham. Very working class backgrounds. Very, 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 urban working class players. Same with Warwickshire as well, because a lot of the players are from Birmingham. And putting it behind a paywall prices out those from lesser backgrounds financially. So there's that kind of us and them divide, which doesn't help the sport grow. I mean, you look at rugby union right now, and the money problems that rugby union has. You look at rugby league and how it's not growing its market share. Again, the TV deal has been criticised for being worth less money for more games. Sky mugs the RFL off completely. The RFL board should stand down. Personal opinion, I don't think they're up to it's the old boys club. They've made a really shocking set of decisions, getting these corporate consultants called IMG in, who were marketing consultants with their criteria. It's doing nothing to grow the game. They should be looking at teams like London and going, right, we need a team in the capital for the game to continue to grow in non-traditional locations. If we can get a team in the capital, make them successful, or support them to be successful, we can grow the wider fan base. There's disenfranchised rugby union fans. There's casual fans who could become hardcore fans if we grow the game. What they're doing is grading. Somehow the Newcastle Thunder, who've gone bust, reformed, re-entered League One, are graded higher than two Super League clubs. Please make that make sense, because I can't. I just can't. How they've done this grading is ridiculous. Honestly, Gateshead only spent one season in the Super League before they had to reform as Newcastle. One season, Super League club. One season. Yet they are graded higher than the London Broncos, Castle Tigers. Make it make sense, because I can't. The Bradford Bulls are graded higher than the London Broncos. Bradford Bulls are bankrupt. Odsall Stadium is falling apart. I cannot make that make any sense. I cannot. So the RFL, I've got a lot of criticism for the RFL. I try and stay as neutral as I can, but I can't see anything but this being an absolute cataclysmic failure. Because hypothetically, Wigan could have a disastrous season. Not that it's going to happen, but hypothetically, they could never get relegated, whereas London Broncos could win everything next year, again, hypothetically, and still be kicked out of the league in 2025. Make it make sense. There is no merit to what you do on the field. This criteria is flawed. It really is the most backwards thinking thing. The fact that a team that has just gone bust and reformed can be graded higher than a Super League club is ridiculous. The fact that London Broncos were in a higher league anyway before the Newcastle Thunder went bust, yet the Newcastle Thunder are graded higher under IMG's grading, is frigging ridiculous. It's just make it make sense, because I can't. And if rugby league is to grow in the UK, it needs to grow outside of the M62 corridor, which this grading does not allow it to do. If anything, it shrinks the game further. It constrains the sport further than it already is. The TV deal that they've signed up to is a joke. For that alone, the RFL board and the Super League board need to just completely resign and hang their heads in shame, because they've allowed themselves to be mugged off by Sky. Sky are laughing for that one. They've got more games were costing less money. So the league's actually making less money out of the TV deal, which is a joke. They haven't named the free-to-air broadcaster they've got as a broadcast partner. They haven't named how many games are going to be on free-to-air TV that are Super League games. They haven't confirmed who that broadcast. They've confirmed that they're going to have a free-to-air broadcaster. Can't tell us who it is. The league starts in less than 2 months, or just over 2 months. They haven't named the free-to-air partner. The TV deal they've signed is worth less money for more games. Make that make sense, because I can't. So the RFL board are a joke. They should resign. If that was a company, the shareholders would ask that board to resign en masse. They would go, "You are not fit to be on the board running our company. You've just made. You would be gone. You'll be sacked. The company's in administration. You'll be sacked. You'll be gone. No, that's not good enough. Bye bye. This is not acceptable. Cannot understand it. Make it make sense. The grading is flawed. We know that. Which basically means Cosman and the London Broncos can meet in the Super League Grand Final and both get relegated at the end of next season. So there's no point in what they do on the field. It is pointless. They could throw everything at it on the field, have a really great season, and they could both relegate. The international games, farcical. Farcical. That's why I think these NRL games in Vegas have to work. If they fail, which I'm hoping they don't, then it sets rugby league back 30 years. But yeah, all the rugby league internationals that were played were, apart from England, Tonga, were all organised by the NRL. All of them, because NRL players were in every single squad. Those Pacific internationals we saw in both the men's and women's game were all NRL organised. The IRL is just as bad as the RFL. Completely pointless organisation. They've wasted a lot of money. They can't organise World Cups properly. They can't organise international calendar properly. They can't communicate with the lesser developing nations to improve the quality of the game outside of the Pacific nations, Australia, New Zealand, and England, and France. They just cannot grow the game for the developing nations. They can't organise World Cups properly. I think the problem with the last World Cup is obviously it was delayed by a year. The organisers stated there were 4 options on the table, and the worst of all the options was delaying by a year because it would cost them more money than profit. They said full attendance, partial attendance, no attendance on time, or delay by a year and hope that the attendance picks up post whatever restrictions are in place. In the end, Australia and New Zealand pull out because of our government completely fouling up all the COVID protocols, Boris Johnson and all those parties, and they went for option 4, which was the least favoured option. It meant they lost more money than had they gone with no attendance and just played. So there's that. They allowed 2 nation governing bodies, that would be the ARL and New Zealand Rugby League, to basically bully the organisers and say we're not playing. But without them, you can't sell the World Cup, even though Samoa made a final and England won the first game 60 points to 6 or something it was against Samoa. Only one of those 2 nations. But anyway, that's beside the point. Most of the players wanted to play in 2021, not 2022. So it wasn't communicated very well that Australia and New Zealand were going to pull out of the World Cup in 2021. And of course, the IRL awarded the US the following World Cup. They've now pulled out. The French then stepped up. Then money goes missing from the French Olympic organisation, which then impacts what the French government are willing to give the French organisers for the 2025 World Cup. They then pull out, and now we don't have a World Cup host, which is now going to take place in 2026. We don't know who that country is going to be, but it's going to be in the Southern Hemisphere. We're going to call it New Zealand now. Just call it now, because they're the only country that have actually publicly stated that they will be happy to host the event. No, I didn't see enough advertising, but much like the London Baseball series, didn't see much advertising there either. So you could argue that some of these sports events aren't helping themselves. Rugby league basically can sell itself if advertised properly. Now the NRL have gone very, very hard and fast with their Vegas advertising and promotion. Whether you agree with how they've gone around it or not is another thing. They also went hard and fast with their Pacific Rugby League tournament at the end of the season, just in October and November. They went very hard with that. They used some really good footage from previous internationals and the World Cup. They constantly update the footage with highlights from the games that have been played. And again, whether we agree or disagree with how the NRL and how broadcasting Australia went about advertising and promoting their recent Pacific Nations tournament format, they still did something. Super League, yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of promotion for the challenge, the World Club Challenge between Penrith and Wigan. I'm not seeing a lot for that. Again, we don't know who the free-to-air broadcast is going to be, because this season just gone, it was on Channel 4. It was on a free-to-air broadcaster. We don't know who that broadcast is going to be. I mean, that is in 2 months. 2 months, the World Club Challenge. We don't know who the broadcast is going to be off of free-to-air, which is diabolical. It should be on free-to-air. Apparently, the viewership last year was fantastic. And because it's broadcast over here, I can't watch it on the NRL website. There's a geo block, so I have to wait 12 hours before I can watch it on the NRL website on YouTube. So there's that, which is frustrating. Look, I mean, the fact that at the moment England don't actually have any internationals penned in the calendar for this time next year, October, November next year, is worrying. That's not great. Rugby union, I think at international level, it's doing quite well. Club level, it's shambles wherever you are in the world. Australia's just in a mess. Canada is also in a mess, but is that lesser nation, so it's getting less coverage. But in reality, the fact that Toronto Arrows have folded and they failed to make the last World Cup tells you Rugby Canada is in a bit of a shambles themselves. Australia, I mean, look, they're on their third coach in 12 months, whoever they appoint to replace Eddie Jones. I mean, that's not good. They're not in a good place. They've got just under 4 years to prepare themselves for the World Cup, go through that World Cup cycle, sort their international setup out, sort their grassroots out. I don't know if they're going to be able to turn it around. The fact that Eddie Jones, basically the whole World Cup, was saying, I'm not talking to Japan, this is all BS, I've signed a 5-year deal, I'm going to be the coach of the next World Cup, and then he quits and goes and signs with Japan, is not a good look. The Japanese obviously needed to find a replacement for their outgoing head coach post-World Cup. They needed to find a replacement. They just spoke to the guy who coached them before, which is, they're free to do that. As I often say, they can't talk to a contracted coach. But the fact that Eddie Jones openly said he was not in discussions with the Japanese union, when clearly he was, has not gone down well with Australians. I don't think it's gone down well with Japanese rugby fans. The fact that, because in Japan there's a lot of culture of respect, and had he been open and say, look, I am in discussions, I am very interested, potentially, I think they would have warmed. I think what's happened with Eddie Jones, I don't think he's making many friends. I don't think he cares. But PR disaster that's now become, because there were rumours circulating during the World Cup, during the pool stages, that he was in open talks whilst the tournament's going on with the Japanese delegation about a potential switch from Australia to Japan, regardless of outcome in the tournament. So even if Australia went to the final and won the bloody thing, it was very, very likely that he was going to jump ship before his contract was out. Japan needed to find a new head coach. Their coach at the time, he was standing down in the tournament. I actually forget his name, which is really annoying, but he'd been there for a couple of World Cups following Eddie Jones. So Japan were obviously clearly looking for a replacement head coach. They knew going into that tournament that regardless of their tournament, wherever they finished in the pool, how far they went in the tournament, that they were going to, as soon as the tournament was done for them, they were in the market for a new head coach. They decided, Eddie Jones' representatives reached out and said, look, we're willing to have discussions. Now, whether there was a clause in Eddie Jones's contract or not, he resigned rather than get fired. So Japan didn't have to activate that clause and pay compensation to Rugby Australia. I think that's why Eddie Jones quit. I think had the Japanese not been interested in discussions with him, I think Rugby Australia would have fired him. But they offered him a 5-year deal. So I would say Union does have a lot of flaws. It's not being governed very well. I mean, their changes to tackle rules are just as reactionary, if not more so. But I did. I'm going to look at some of my recent surveys I put on the channel because at the end of the World Cup, or towards the end of the World Cup, I did a poll on the channel discussing has the new TMO rule got things right. Well, rugby got this right, and I got some mixed responses, which I found very interesting because I did this poll well before poll stages had ended. So let's have a look. How the world? Well, this is 3 months ago. So this is midway through the World Cup. So this is before the knockout stages, and this is what was very interesting with the percentage results. Have World Rugby got the new TMO yellow red card rule? That's the review system, right or wrong? Yes, they got it right. Was one of the answers, one of the options I put. No, they've got it wrong. Or unsure, wait and see. Now, bear in mind, when I posted this, we hadn't reached the knockout stage. 48% of respondents said yes, they got the rule right at the time that I posted. This was obviously after the Tom Curry incident and after the Segrin incident, which were basic carbon copies, similar sin binnable offences. Curry gets upgraded to a red. Segrin, the Chile captain, stays a yellow. So I think it was a few days after, and I was a bit like, "Oh, this is BS." 13% said no, they got it wrong, and 39% of respondents said unsure, wait and see. Now, if I had posted that after the final, I think we would have got everything flipped. I think the no response would have been higher. I think the unsure, wait and see would have been lower. I think the yes would have been lower. I think no would have got about 8%. Because of the date that I posted that and how respondents haven't really voted since then. It's interesting. Now, the latest survey question that I put on the community tab is what is the greatest NRL grand final of all time? Now, I put 3 options down plus other. If you think another one apart from these 3 years is a great one, you can vote. 2015. No one so far has voted for 2015, which in my opinion is the greatest grand final of all time. 2016, 33% of respondents, so a third, have said 2016, when Cronulla beat Melbourne, is the greatest grand final of all time. Every other respondent, which is 67%, has 66.66 recurring officially, but 67% have gone this year's grand final is the greatest grand final of all time. No one has voted for the other option yet. Now that's only been up on the channel for a day. I do suggest that people consider voting for that. It's very interesting. Right, I just want to have a look at. Now, here's an interesting one that I posted a few months back. Which league is most popular with channel viewers? So I posted the four big four major leagues in the US. I put them as the options that you could vote for: NHL, Major League Baseball, NBA, NFL. And this one does surprise me. So coming in 4th place, 4% of votes was Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball is not popular with viewers. The NBA got 8%. The NBA is not as popular as it would apparently be with TV ratings and how much money it makes in the US. The NFL came in at second with 42%, and the NHL came top with 46%. That surprised me, considering if you flip that, the NFL is the most profitable league in North America by some margin. Major League Baseball and the NBA are pretty close, and the NHL makes the least money. The NHL is the most popular sport on the channel. That is very, very interesting. Now, I do have a lot of viewers in Canada and the US, but that one interested me. Now, this was quite interesting. Will the 2023 Major League Baseball London Series be a success? Now, this was just obviously before both games were played. 75% of respondents to that said yes. 8% said no. 17% said we'll wait and see. So that really surprised me. The Paul Kent situation. Will Paul Kent keep his jobs at Fox Sport and the Daily Telegraph? Only 21% said yes. 64% said no, you'll get fired or leave, and 14% had a wait and see attitude. Obviously, now he's been found not guilty. That's going to be very, very interesting. And they're the ones that obviously um, you can still vote on because they're relevant questions about. Quite very satisfied with that one. So that's some interesting surveys that are still active on the channel. That makes sense to vote for. Merry Christmas to you too. Yes, I did get this Canadian style hoodie shirt for Christmas. I feel very Canadian wearing it. I wish it was in red plaid rather than the green and blue, but I still feel Canadian wearing it. I'm not wearing the hockey jersey today because I've got to dig it out and wash it and get it dry for tomorrow when I'll do a video. Looking for everything I'm looking forward to for 2024. But yeah, no, rugby, it was very interesting to look at some of those survey responses. The grand final one I've only recently posted, but some of the responses to some of those surveys were very, very interesting. And I think if I'd posted those surveys a little bit later, or a little bit earlier, we would have got different responses. I think it's when they were posted is at that precise moment, people who view this channel were like, that's how I feel. If they were posted a week later or a week earlier or a day later or a day earlier, we may have had different responses. I mean, if I did that NRL grand final survey before the 2023 grand final, I reckon the responses would have been, I should have put 29. I think I should have put 2019 on there. Because that obviously went right to the wire as well. I can't remember. I should have put 2019. So maybe the questions, but it was very, very interesting. What did I spend Christmas by myself? No, I went to see family for a few hours. Only got home about just over an hour and a bit ago. Just did the live stream. So I spent about 3-4 hours at my mum's. Just went for dinner, and yeah, didn't stay long. Everyone's been unwell in my family. Everyone's just, as you can tell, I'm a little bit under the weather. I've got a bit of a bad sinus, a bit of a cold. I've not been 100%. Most of my family have been ill. My sister's not been very well. My mum's not been very well. My brother's not been very well. The dogs are just big dogs. So there's that. So I spent some time with family. Had a very nice dinner. But last year I was really ill. I wasn't feeling well at all. This year I've been feeling a lot better, but still not 100%. Would be the best way to describe this year. But not as unwell as last year where I had COVID and I was really ill and I don't know, I shouldn't have gone, but I did. Oh, you saw me on Instagram. I don't know what I was doing on Instagram. I was probably commenting on something or sharing something highly hilarious and dark humoured. That's generally what I do on Instagram. I don't post a lot of stuff on Instagram, but I do comment on mostly sporting topics. But also, I do share some really hilarious stuff with my friends, and I find some good reels that are quite funny. Yeah. It has been an interesting year. It has been. I wouldn't say it's been a massive year. I think we've had some ups and downs this year. I think we've reached some milestones. There's been a few controversial topics, obviously, that have happened in the world of sport that have been discussion worthy, and it's just you'll notice at times in the year things slow down a bit. So until the transfer market opens and the FA Cup third round comes around, things will slow down a little bit. Obviously, Boxing Day tomorrow. There's going to be a lot of football on. Obviously, there's a lot of bed hair. I've been awake since 3 o'clock this morning. I've got bed hair. Obviously, there's a few managers under pressure. Pochettino, Ten Hag, for example. Obviously, Cooper's been sacked. There's a couple of managers under pressure in the Premier League. It'll be interesting to see if Pochettino and Ten Hag see out the season. I can't see how either of those managers will be in charge come the end of the season. Uh, I think with Sir Jim Ratcliffe confirming he's purchased a 25% stake in the club, and that the Ineos Group are going to take over the day-to-day footballing operations. With the fact that as time goes on, they're going to increase their stake in the club to the takeover point of 75%, where they can say that we're taking over the club now. We're going to be in charge. Um, I can see a managerial change, and I can see a change at board level. I can see a change. We're going to see some massive changes at Man United. I think the problem is the core of that squad is the same squad that Ranić had, that Solskjaer had, that Mourinho had, that previous managers had, and so there's that. What's my thoughts on Boxing Day and Christmas Eve? Well, back in the day, we used to have matches on Christmas Day. Back in the day, and that is a thing. Matches were played on Christmas Day until I think it was the mid-60s. It was a thing. Um, which is I find very interesting, is they used to have the Christmas Day fixture. Obviously, in cricket, we have the Boxing Day tests, so England will be playing a Boxing Day test match for a one-day international tomorrow, um, which is a thing. Um, my thoughts on it, it doesn't really bother me personally. It's not something that overly concerns me or worries me in any way. Um, for me, I prefer watching cup games and internationals, tournament internationals. So for me, I'm not overly bothered by a game on Christmas Eve or a game on Boxing Day. There'll be those from our parents or grandparents or great grandparents, who remember games on Christmas Day. So I'm not overly bothered personally. I know it's become a bit of a tradition now. 3 o'clock on Boxing Day, a lot of people will either go to games or watch on the TV, and it's a full fixture, pretty much a full fixturing schedule. Um, but as I say, it doesn't overly bother me. I'm not really bothered either way. Um, Look, the fact that other sports have that winter break, if they are a winter league or play over the winter, like ice hockey, for example, will have a winter break. Um, and some other leagues, like rugby union, rugby league, whatever it may be, will have that winter break where they don't play games over the festive period, or they just. I know it's pre-season when it comes to rugby league, but they might go, okay, we'll have a week off around Christmas, New Year, like training, whatever. We'll see. Oh, so Jim Ratcliffe, he also owns in the Ineos cycling team, formerly Team Sky. He also owns a Swiss football club as well. Um, we'll see what plays out with Sir Jim Ratcliffe and his involvement and the Ineos group and his family's involvement, because he's in his 70s. He's not a young man. This is not a guy who's in his 30s, 40s, or 50s. This is a guy who's 70 odd years, 73 years old or something. He's not a young man. Um, well, well, I'll have to look into Nice and their performances and where they were pre his ownership, post his ownership, and competitiveness and some of the signings they've made and where they sit in the French league and performances over time. Well, the Lineker's podcast alongside Shearer and Micah Richards. I find that podcast very interesting and a bit more down to earth than what you see on Match of the Day. But were players getting deliberately suspended over the festive period? We see it in a lot of sports where there may be a player of a certain nationality and there's like a religious or national holiday in a country deliberately getting suspended so they can spend time with their. Yes, this is not this is a badly kept secret in sports that players will deliberately get suspended over certain points of the year depending on what league they're in, what sport they're playing, and so you might get players deliberately, like in the NHL, for example. You may be Canadian, want to spend Canadian Thanksgiving with the family, get suspended. Um, Same with American Thanksgiving, when only I think the original six teams play or something, get deliberately suspended. Um, it's there are certain players who, yeah, deliberately get suspended for certain periods of the season. Neymar's a very famous one with his sister's birthday, for example. So, family reason, he's either injured or suspended on that day. It's noticeable. That's a badly kept secret. Um, Nice have been a stable League One club for years, but their last major final appearance was 2005 or so. Oh, look, Nice haven't. Nice are historically successful, haven't been successful for a long time. Yeah, I mean, look, it's an interesting one. Just looking at, we'll have to obviously look at you know, so Jim Radcliffe's involvement with Nice, and where their league before the takeover and after takeover, what happens with their league average finishing position, average points, progression in, let's say, the French Cup, and the European competitions, how far they progress, transfer spend, managerial turnover. These will be things to look at in regards to you know, where they were before, and certain trends. Like, are they going through a lot of managers, or is their league position lower or higher than what it was before? Are they progressing? Are they challenging? That kind of thing. Yeah, well, then their stadium got rebuilt, obviously, for uh, you know the Euros in 2016, and the women's, was it the Women's World Cup or the Women's Euros? I think it was the Women's World Cup, um, which was taking place at a similar time, around, was it 2017? They basically got their stadium rebuilt for those two tournaments, so they got their stadium completely refurbed, and a nice new. But Nice is an absolute dump of a city. Nice, everything's Nice and the Côte d'Azur, really nice. You know, touristy because it's near Cannes and it's near Monaco and it's, the Côte d'Azur, and you've got Saint Tropez and all that nearby. It is an absolute dive. Nice is a violent city. It's rough as. It's like a smaller version of Marseille. It's a very deprived area when you get outside the seafront. When you're out the seafront, the tourist area, it is do not go. There's a lot of crime there, a lot of deprivation, high unemployment, no-go zones where the police don't even go. There's a lot of gangs in Nice. There's a lot of racial tensions in Nice. There's a lot of haves and have-nots. Very divided city, very, very poor city. Um, as I say, when you get away from the seafront, you go off the beaten track, it is a shithole. Quite honestly, and the French would rather you didn't know that it was actually a very violent, dangerous city. Nice must have a good recruitment manager, though, as they managed to attract big names. Yeah, they managed to get some high profile players. Obviously, some great players have played for the club historically. Of course, it's the Côte d'Azur, so you don't live in Nice. You probably live in Saint Tropez. The players are like, oh yeah, look, the climate's nice. When you get out of the city, like to the more rural little villages and towns along the coast, it's obviously quite pleasant to live. So you've obviously got Monaco just down the road. You've got Saint Tropez. You've got Cannes. These resort towns. So if you're a player signing there, you're not going to be living in Nice. Just going to put it out there. You'll be living in one of the nicer places along the coast. The climate will have a big part in where a player signs. You'll see if you're a player and you want to sign somewhere, Nice is a good place to sign for because it's a nice climate. It is a nice climate. If you are a player of Italian background, Italian is spoken in Nice. It's Nizza is the Italian way of saying Nice. There's a big Italian influence because it used to be part of Savoy, which is an Italian, and Piedmont, which is where Turin is. So there's a big Italian influence. Garibaldi was born in Nice. There you go. Guy helped unify Italy in the 1850s, 60s, and 70s. Let that sink in. So there's a big Italian connection. A lot of the surnames in Nice are Italian. The local dialect of Savoyard is got Italian isms in it. So you could be an Italian player attracted from Serie A, for example, play for Nice, and you could still live in Liguria and just drive across the border and you're there. You could drive from Turin to Nice in what 3-4 hours you're there. Um, so you could still live in Italy, for example, in Piedmont uh, or Liguria, and just hop across the border and you're in Nice within an hour or so. So it's not. There's a reason why Nice can still attract big name players. Location. It's in a very good location. The weather's quite nice in winter. The weather's nice, good climate, reasonably competitive size. You've got some solid financial backing, regardless of where the team's at. So you know you're going to get paid, which is important. And you'll see it in a lot of sports leagues where, especially in North America, for example, where if you're a free agent, where are you going to sign? You're going to sign for a team in the Northeast, so the New York, Boston, Baltimore corridor, which is bloody expensive. Or are you going to sign in a place like Arizona or Florida, where the taxes are less and it's cheaper to live and the weather's nicer? This is why teams, especially in Canada and in you know the Midwest and in the Northeast corridor, do struggle to attract free agents unless they're paying overs for them. Cost of living's higher, taxes are higher, and the weather's not as nice. So if you are, let's say you're an NHL player, you're a free agent, you've got 7 Canadian teams and 29 US teams. Where are you going to sign as a free agent? You're going to sign where the taxes are lower, the weather's nicer. So that's Arizona, that's Florida, that's the Carolinas, that's Texas. It makes it harder for teams based in Seattle, metro areas of California, places like New York, Toronto, although they have their certain draw because of, hey, it's New York and Toronto, some of the biggest global cities in the world, they're going to have to pay more to get that player to relocate where the taxes are higher, the cost of living is higher, and they've got to relocate their family. That's why your Floridas, your Arizonas, your Texas-based teams, it's easier to sign a free agent in the southern states because the taxes are lower, the weather is nicer, and the cost of living is less. So location does have a part to play in where a player will sign for a team. Yeah, I mean, look, Manchester, the Golden Triangle, is not as cheap as it used to be to live. Even though it is the Northwest, it is not as cheap as 15 years ago. And that is a fact. Because of the massive influx of investment into Manchester, it's one of the fastest growing metro areas. There's a lot of investment, a lot of high rise skyscrapers going up. It is not as cheap as it used to be, and the crime rate has dropped off a little bit. It's less. Manchester was called Gunchester for the best part of 25 years because of all the gang violence from the 80s through to the 2010s. Places like Moss Side, for example, were no-go areas. Not as bad as that now, partly because everyone's been shot, but all the gangsters have shot each other. But Greater Manchester was called Greater Gunchester for a while. Nottingham was like Shottingham. So certain cities get these nicknames because of the related violence and criminality. But Manchester is not as cheap to live. It's still cheaper than London and the southeast, but this is why players are now looking at places like Newcastle and looking at, let's say Leeds get back to the Premier League, they'll find it easier to sign players who are available because it's just that slightly bit cheaper. And you've got the Yorkshire Dales, which is just fantastic. Who could not love the Yorkshire Dales? Just please let that sink in. Yes, they can attract players, but Man City have got all the money, so they're financially stable. They've got the manager, and Man United have got the history and the previous success. So it's a status symbol. It's why they're attracting players. Although both clubs this season are having wank seasons by their standards, so yeah, there's that. But they will attract players because the recent success of Man City, so recency bias, and the historical success at Man United, plus the history of that club historically for success over a long period of time, will attract a player because of the history of what both clubs represent. But when it comes to North of England, you'll find you're more likely to get a player to potentially, if they're free and available and they're a free signing, they might want to sign for a Leeds. Not because Leeds is any nicer or any worse than Manchester, it's because it's cheaper. It's cheaper, and the Yorkshire Dales is stunning, absolutely stunning. So there's that hypothesis that, okay, right now the Manchester clubs are the it clubs, but Leeds again might suddenly become. Leeds had some great players in the 90s. They were able to attract constant top quality talent in the 90s, early 2000s, which is one of the reasons why they bankrupted themselves. But they were attracting international talent from all over the world to play in Leeds. And then, of course, you've got what's happening now at Newcastle. Newcastle and Sunderland historically have always managed to attract overseas players because it's so dirt-arse cheap to live up there. And then you've got the wilds of Northumberland, like villages like towns like Hexham, which is stunning. Hadrian's Wall and just the beautiful landscape, which does have an impact. If you want, and Newcastle's a mental night out. So certain locations, you have that reputation of being good nightlife. So if you're a younger player, you might go, "Oh, I might want to sign." It's like rugby league in Australia or the AFL in Australia. Some players will be willing to sign for a Sydney or a Melbourne club because of the nightlife, because they're young, they're reckless a little bit, they've got a lot of money suddenly, and there's a lot to do. Other players might sign for a more regional club like a Geelong or a Newcastle or a Queensland Cowboys. Because it's a bit more family friendly, although Townsville is known as a party town. But a player may be attracted to sign for a Port Adelaide or a Geelong or a Newcastle Knights or a North Queensland Cowboys because it's cheaper to live, you can raise a family there, your money goes further, and it's a bit more of a family-orientated environment because they're a slightly older free agent, they're a slightly older player, they've got a young family, they want to get their kids in good schools, they want a bit more of a relaxed life, and that has a bearing. Some players, might have an issue with that kind of drinking, partying too much. Mitchell Pearce is a player who screams out because he was playing at the Roosters and he ends up at the Newcastle Knights. And it was a good move for him, and it was a good move for the Roosters. Obviously, he had that lengthy suspension. There was the humping of the dog, the dry humping of the dog incident, and pissing himself on his mate's sofa. He got a lengthy suspension. This is after the Todd Carney, pissing on himself pissed in a nightclub. The Sydney Roosters were under the spotlight. Players misbehaving. So Mitchell Pearce doesn't stay with the Roosters, ends up going to Newcastle. It benefits the Roosters because they get Cooper Cronk. They win 2 grand finals. Mitchell Pearce ends up at Newcastle, and it benefits, both sides. Well, it's a big mystery why Gold Coast. Historically, Gold Coast City was a very transient community, so you could never really build a fan base for one, and therefore never rebuild a player base for two. Gold Coast now is an expanding city. People are staying in Gold Coast, and the local regional junior program the Gold Coast Titans now have with the regional juniors, it's fantastic. They've now got a great junior base, which they didn't have before, because Brisbane would just bully them, nickel their players. And now you've got Redcliffe with the Dolphins sort of battling with Brisbane over the juniors in Brisbane. It's creating competition. And what happened with the Gold Coast during the Super League Wars is they didn't really have a great junior base. They just put a team there. I think it was the Crushers, and it didn't work. They didn't have a great stadium. They didn't really have a solid junior base to build for the future. We must win now. They didn't build for the long term. They built for the short term, and it obviously doesn't work when we must win straight away. When you just cobble a team together with an aging Wally Lewis and some other, free agent players. Went, oh, let's go to Gold Coast. They didn't really gel as a team. They didn't have a junior base set up for long-term stability. And so the team failed. Titans come along in the late 2000s. Central Coast had a bid in as well. They wanted to bring back the North Sydney Bears, maybe to the Central Coast, which could still happen for the 18th team. The league went with Gold Coast. They wanted to challenge North Queensland and Brisbane, having that third Queensland team. But what they've managed to do this time around is actually sort out the junior base, which is where every successful team has that pool of junior talent that they can develop, select from, and then bring into their first grade squad via reserve grade, Queensland Cup, etc., Jersey Flegg, all that, under 20s, all that. So this time round, they now have that stable junior base, which is Gold Coast junior base, and just look at their team and look how many juniors in their team have come through their junior system. It's a lot. Same with their NRLW team. A lot of their NRLW team, again, have come through the local junior system, which is fantastic. So both men's and women's teams, I think the future is very bright, and now they've obviously got Des Hasler at the helm of I feel Justin Holbrook was done a dirty by the Frizzell family. They just didn't defend well enough. But they have struggled to build success. When they first came back into the league in 2007, they had bad ownership. They were bankrupt. The league had to step in to run the team. The Cherry Evans non-contract was a disaster. They made some bad signings. Jared Hayne. They made some bad decisions on the field with who they recruited. But what they did have, which the Crushers didn't have, was that solid junior base. And in recent years, they've had a better record over the Broncos than they did in the early years. So there's that. Look, there is a big Pacific Island community as well, and more people are now settling in the Gold Coast and being more transient, because obviously it used to be a young demographic, stay a few years, because the tourism industry, theme parks, the beaches, the nightlife, and they would move on. Now people are actually staying there, and what we're now seeing, a lot of tech companies and engineering companies are now setting up in the city of Gold Coast. It's the fastest growing city in Australia. It will not be long before it breaks the million mark for population. I would say within the next 5 years, it will have hit 1 million people. So it's a fast-growing city. The community is now building roots. It's been growing rapidly for 50-odd years. The demographics have changed. There's more families in Gold Coast now. So there's more youngsters wanting to play the game. And the team now have some great players who are local players, like Fafita, Tino. Got a couple of... who's the Tanner Boyd, the halves? He's a local junior. AJ Brimson, I think, has come through locally. So you've now got those players who raised locally, play juniors locally, have gone through the system, ending up in the first grade team. Pereira is another one, I think. You've got the Fasumalawi brothers. They've attracted them back. They've attracted Tino and David Fafita from Brisbane, from the Broncos, back to Gold Coast where they played their juniors, which is important. Sexton, they let go to Canterbury, but I can see him potentially coming back to Gold Coast later in his career. So I think they're doing things right now. They weren't doing it before, but the demographic of the location has changed since the Crushers in the 90s, massively. The city demographic has changed. The city has changed massively in that time. There's been a lot more development. A lot more people have now moved to Gold Coast because it's cheap. There's a lot of jobs, and it's more than just a tourism destination now. There's other things. There's engineering companies. I think there's a couple of V8 supercar teams based in Gold Coast with their team hubs and engineering hubs, which employ a lot of people, and then the supply industry on top of that. So there's that kind of tech engineering side of things. And of course, it's a gateway to southeast Queensland, south of Brisbane. So it's a very important transportation hub as well now, because of the Tweed River. And it's a good link between northern New South Wales and southern Queensland. So there's a bit more going on in Gold Coast now than what there was 30, 40 years ago. It was like the Australian Vegas. It's a little bit more to the city. And people from all over Australia are moving there and all over the world. So you get that melting pot of nationalities and cultures as well, which you then see borne out in the team that's taking the field. The women's team has got a Sri Lankan player of Sri Lankan origin on the wing, so just let that sink in. And even the women's team are nicking players from the Brisbane Broncos. So let that sink in. Is both the men's and women's teams have got a great recruitment policy. They're really scouting the young talent, and now they've got a good structure off the field as well as on the field. And I can see Des Hasler taking them to top 8, maybe even top 4. Do not be surprised if Des Hasler gets this team into the latter stages of the finals, potentially a grand final within a couple of years. He's got there are the pieces there. The issue they've got to work on is their defence and their discipline. But this team can attack. They can score a lot of points going forward. It's all about that discipline on their try line, that defence, and you've got Kieran Ford in the halves. He spent how many years working with Des Hasler? Won a championship with Des Hasler before, so you've got to bear that in mind. Is that you've got a guy coaching them, and a key part of the spine of the team who can play a hooker as well, which is very important. He's played under this coach for many, many years prior and knows how this coach operates, what his systems are, and all that. Yeah, they did, which because it was a one team city, which meant they had the pick of all the juniors in all of Brisbane, and it angered a lot of Queenslander fans outside of state of origin because you had the old Sydney competitions where we get the basis of the NRL, and you had the Brisbane competition in the 70s and 80s where you obviously had Easts, which is Brisbane East Tigers. You had Norths, you had Redcliffe, you had all these other teams. You had the Ipswich team just outside. You had all the other teams in the Brisbane competition in southern Queensland, and then the Broncos are given that expansion in '88 north of the Tweed. And that pissed off a lot of Queenslanders because they felt they needed several teams to represent. Yep, Logan, you've got Ipswich, obviously Redcliffe, who now have a team in the NRL. Obviously Gold Coast as well have had several attempts, but now they obviously have a stable team in the NRL. But in the 80s and early 90s, the stereotype is that everyone bought into the Broncos, which is a load of BS. A load of BS. People on the Gold Coast, people up in Townsville and Cairns and Rockhampton, Toowoomba, they were like, well, we don't identify with Brisbane. We identify with our local competition, our local teams, our local juniors, our local reps. We want a professional team of NRL standard. And the Broncos did obviously make it as difficult as possible to have another team in Brisbane and another team in South Queensland. They relented when the Titans were readmitted, as in the new Gold Coast franchise, which now exists. And obviously, eventually, I think 2 of the 3 bids, one of the bids was Central Coast, I believe, and 2 of the bids were South Queensland, including Redcliffe. You had Ipswich, and I think there was a Central Coast bid. So 2 of the 3 bids that came forward for this latest expansion team were in the Brisbane metro area and in that South Queensland area, and they cannot veto if 2/3 of the bids coming in for expansion are from South Queensland. They cannot veto them. If imagine all the expansion bids were from South Queensland, like Redcliffe, let's just say Rockhampton had a bid, for example, or Sunshine Coast. But we'll go with Rockhampton because a lot of NRL games have been played there and they've got a good local system, local league and local junior system. Let's say next wave of expansion, let's say it doesn't have New Zealand, doesn't have Perth, doesn't have Central Coast. Let's say the next wave of expansion again is, let's say Cairns, let's say Rockhampton, let's say Toowoomba, let's say it's Ipswich, and all the teams coming for bids are all Queensland teams. The Broncos cannot veto Jack because the league needs to get to an even number of teams. But they did try their best to delay, hamper, and obstruct growth in Queensland because it would have disrupted their hold over the junior base, which is where the Melbourne Storm come in and disrupt the Broncos' hold over the junior base from a distance, which is why there isn't a junior base in Victoria. Do you think the Dolphins will eventually settle in Redcliffe or continue being well, Redcliffe is a Queensland. Redcliffe is a suburb of Brisbane. So they are going to continue. Redcliffe is a suburb of Brisbane. It's an instance. It's on Morrison Bay, on the headland. It's in East Brisbane. Just to ruin it for you, it's in southeast Brisbane. Brisbane is Queensland. Brisbane is the capital of Queensland, so that question's a bit flawed. Redcliffe is a suburb of Brisbane. Moreton Bay is where the Dolphins Stadium is on the outskirts of the Redcliffe area in southeast Brisbane. So I hate to disappoint you, but they are Queensland. Sorry, they're in Brisbane. They're in the Greater Brisbane area. I don't know how to respond to that question, but you've answered your own question because they are going to continue being a Queensland side because Redcliffe. Redfern, I think you got confused with, which is where South Sydney's training base is. You just confused yourself. But the issue now is I've read an article where three South Queensland sides are arguing over the boundaries of their junior catchment areas. And it looks like Gold Coast is going to lose one to Brisbane. Brisbane's going to lose one to the Dolphins. And they're reshaking up the catchments of the junior pathways, so the junior clubs that then feed into the local comps. So the regional comps that then feed into, picking up a player who's playing in the local comp, pick up a player and go, you're in our Queensland Cup side. And there's a big pushback from the Dolphins against the Broncos for junior base because the Broncos, until a couple of years ago, until 2007, had the whole of South Queensland to themselves. From 2007 until last year or the year before, they had all the Brisbane metro area to themselves. So they've had the pick of the litter of the best of Queensland players south of Rockhampton since 1988. And, their junior system has been so good that other teams are picking up their rejects or players they deem aren't going to make the Broncos system. So your Cameron Smiths, he was overlooked by the Broncos. Your Cooper Cronks, your Billy Slaters, all overlooked by the Broncos. There's been some great Redcliffe juniors that were overlooked by the Broncos, even though originally Redcliffe was in their catchment area in the Brisbane competition, who've gone on to play south of the Tweed. Oh, well, the Redcliffe Dolphins obviously were the Brisbane competition team in the local comp, and they just weren't allowed to have the trademark. But they are basically going to be that other team in the Brisbane metro area. Right now, there's a big debate about catchment areas for juniors between Gold Coast Broncos and between Titans, Broncos, and Dolphins. This off season, there's a big debate about changing junior boundaries in coming seasons, and the Broncos aren't happy with this. The problem is a lot of people in Brisbane and in Queensland in general were never happy with just having the Broncos to cheer for, so that automatically alienated a lot of fans, which is why you see a lot of St George Dragons, because obviously certain Queenslanders, such as Gordon Tallis, played for St George before playing for the Broncos. There's a lot of St George fans. Now there's St George Illawarra Dragons, but St George Dragons and Illawarra Steelers fans in Brisbane. There's a lot of Souths fans in Brisbane because obviously Souths, their history, random Souths fan, they get everywhere. There are a lot of Cowboys fans in Brisbane because that was the other team in Queensland until 2007 that was consistently there. So a lot of Cowboys fans in Brisbane because they, again, a lot of fans in Brisbane felt alienated because of the Broncos being the only team in Brisbane. Went, there's another Queensland team. There are Titans fans in Brisbane because, again, that alienation for a long time. Father to son, I don't support the Broncos. Also, there is this. A lot of people have moved from New South Wales into the Brisbane metro area over many, many years, and they take their fandom of the Sharks, Souths, the Roosters, Penrith, for example, the Tigers, the Magpies back in the day. They take that fandom with them. So the Broncos, while the media hyped them up as Queensland's team and all this. A lot of fans never bought into that, which is why you'll see a lot of Blues fans at State of Origin in Brisbane. Well, you've already got Easts, but then you've got the Balmain side of the West Tigers dual venture in Balmain, who want to have a separate club again. So you've got Easts in Brisbane, who are the East Tigers, and you've got West Tigers in Sydney, who would be the Balmain Tigers, and you've got the Western Suburb Magpie. But I mean, I've never been a fan of the dual venture model. It didn't work with the Northern Eagles because it just didn't work with the Sydney Bears. The Bears and the Sea Eagles merged together. It didn't last very long. It's not really working with the Dragons, and it's definitely not working with the Tigers. There's a reason why these teams aren't very successful. I would say potentially we could see the Tigers and Magpies split. We could see the West Tigers cease to be. If they continue to basically be the worst team in the league or near the bottom of the league, and it doesn't work with Benji and Robbie Farah at the coaching helm, it doesn't work with this interim board and then the new board that will come in, and they continue to not progress and they continue to miss finals, and they've only had finals in 3 seasons and won one grand final, never been minor premiers. If they continue to be mediocre to crap, there's going to be a point where people go, bring back the Magpies, bring back the Tigers as a separate entity, and or fold the team all together like the Newtown Jets back in the day. There's going to become a point where they go, this is not working. It's clearly not working for the Dragons with the Illawarra Steelers and the St George Dragons merger either. It's not working there. It didn't work with the North Sydney Bears and the Manly Warringah Sea Eagles. That didn't last very long. So at some point the league's going to go. We've had a 20-team league in the past. At some point we will go back to a 20-team league. I think that's going to happen. I think it will happen sooner rather than later. In saying that, the situation with West Tigers is a shambles. They haven't called themselves Western Suburb Tigers or Wests and then Tigers. It's West Tigers. Much like Dolphins, just the Dolphins. They're very confused about what their home ground is because they have 2 home stadiums, Leichhardt and Campbelltown. Both stadiums are just not good enough. And the whole thing's a shambles. They've had bad financial oversight. They've not been well managed. They've had constant drama in the boardroom, division between the Balmain side and the Magpies Western Suburbs side, although now they seem to be more unified. Ironically, the Magpies side of things are now more profitable than the Balmain side of things. There could be a push to get the Magpies back in and turn Balmain into their reserve grade side or vice versa. Just go Balmain Tigers again and drop the west side of things. Have the Magpies as the feeder team or vice versa. There's a push for that. There's a frustrated fan base because they haven't settled on just go for a new stadium. Just build a brand new stadium. Put the reserve grade Balmain team in, let's say Campbelltown. I think Campbelltown. And put the other team in the Magpies in Leichhardt, for example. Or is it the way around? So is the Magpies Campbelltown or Tigers Leichhardt? I can't remember, but they need to have a home ground because it's not working. It's the same with the Dragons with Wynn Stadium in Cogra. It's not working there either. There's a reason why these 2 sides were the bottom 2 sides this season. There's a reason why both sides can't recruit players. Disunity in the boardroom, constant coach turnover, which is what we've seen. Shane Flanagan, who is a premiership winning coach, much like Madge Maguire was a premiership winning coach, he can't even get players to sign with the Dragons. So there's that. I think it's time to go. This is not working. As is, they need to go. We need to have a stadium, which we call home, because they already play games at what is now CommBank, formerly Bankwest, as a home stadium with Parramatta. They have Campbelltown, they have Leichhardt. They don't really have a home stadium. Same with the Dragons. They're playing Cogra and at Wynn Stadium in Wollongong. Pick one. Pick one. Put your reserve grade team in one and play at the other. It's not hard. It's dual venture club, divided board. It's just not working. I do think we will get back to a 20 team comp. We had that in the 90s. I've done a few shocking histories, and yeah, we had a 20 team comp. Then we had a shrinking of the league. South Sydney get booted out. The West Tigers are born. The North Sydney Bears are born. The Northern Bears are born. Or the Northern Eagles. Is it the Northern Eagles? Yeah, it was the Northern Eagles. It was the North Sydney Bears. And of course, the St George Illawarra Dragons are born. These dual ventures are merged together. They don't work. One separates. One team drops out the league. The Souths come back. And then, obviously, we ultimately had Gold Coast join the league, and the rest is history. But I do think a 20-team comp will return, which means a team in Perth, which means another team in New Zealand, which will mean another team somewhere else, like Central Coast, Sunshine Coast, Adelaide, somewhere else in Queensland, somewhere else in New South Wales, somewhere else in Victoria, maybe in Melbourne, maybe Geelong, whatever it may be. It will mean a team in Western Australia, potentially a team in Adelaide, and then that 18th team, New Zealand or Queensland or New South Wales or Victoria. And then you can say you've got a national competition. I can potentially see maybe one of these two joint venture clubs splitting back. Let's say Dragons, Steelers and Dragons return. Bang, there you go, problem solved. Whack the 18th team in. There's your 19th and 20th teams. Bosh. And a lot of fans would be happy with that. Bring back the Steelers. That's my head. That's a wall. Bring back the St George Dragons as a separate unity. Bosh. Entity, shall I say? There's your problem solved. But I can't see the league doing that because there's always that. There's too many teams in Sydney. Have you seen the AFL? No one's saying there's too many teams in Melbourne, although North Melbourne may end up in Tas. Whether that actually gets finalised or not, whether the AFL can actually fix that is another thing. But where we're currently at is 20-team competition is looking very likely. I can see more expansion in the women's competition, where we see them play each other twice rather than once, where they expand their finals, where they get 12, 14 teams. Maybe they mirror what the NRL currently has. But that's a debate for out of my head. That really hurt. I headbutted my wall. It really hurts. But again, that's a discussion for 5, 10 years in the future. Right now, we don't know where the 18th team is going to be. What we do know is I think by 2025 we'll have that expansion team in place, or at least announced. And what we've seen with the issues with the CBA recently and TV deals and standoff between the Players Association and the league, I think there's going to be a bit more negotiation and potential standoff between the players and the league and remuneration, claim payments and such. Do you think we'd still have Bears in the NRL if the delay didn't happen to the new Central Coast Stadium in '99? Potentially, yes. But following the Super League war, Canterbury are lucky to still have a team. So we could have seen more teams merge together in these dual ventures, which is the most flawed model. Although the Central Coast could come back as a team as the next expansion team. So don't rule out the Central Coast being the next team, or a Perth Bears, or the Bears as an organisation. They have a very strong bid already there. They're very keen to put their hand up as an expansion franchise. They've got backing with some high-profile ex-players who play for the old North Sydney Bears. So keep an eye out for the Central Coast potentially getting a team. With what we've seen with the women's game, and obviously when they took games outside of Sydney during COVID and all that, like bubble play and relocating to hubs when the New Zealand Warriors were hosted, Central Coast will definitely back a team. It's it's a thing. Rockhampton could back a team. People go, that's too small a location. Um, it's definitely got more population than Bondi in the eastern suburbs. So yeah, Central Coast, Rockhampton could have a team without question. Could have the Rockhampton insert team name here. So a lot has changed since the Super League war in the mid-90s. The economics, the strength of currency, the wages, the TV deal, the sponsorship, the population demographics. A lot has changed in the last 25 years. 24, 25 years. A lot has changed. The situation is much more different now than what it was then. The Bears are in a very strong position. And I can see and there's already a Central Coast Roosters team playing in the women's state competition. The Central Coast has hosted both NRL and NRLW games. The stadium's been packed out. Central Coast, very, very similar to Gold Coast and some other cities on the north of Queensland all the way down to the New South Wales, is a fast-growing metro area. More and more people are getting priced out of Sydney, getting priced out of Melbourne. They're looking at Central Coast as a location to move to because it's cheaper. And a lot of families are settling there. So you're going to have this future playing pool. There's a good junior playing pool there in both boys and girls, and men and women. There's a good regional competition there through in the New South Wales, competitions. There's a lot of players who are currently playing in the NRL that were brought up on the Central Coast. So the potential is there that it could work. A big negative for the likes of Central Coast, Illawarra, and even Newcastle is the Sydney sponsorship. You say that, but what is, as I said about Gold Coast, when the Crushers first came in, Gold Coast was just this transient, touristy kind of small version of Las Vegas in Australia, small version of Miami in Australia. A lot of tourists, they weren't sticking around. A lot of single people living there, no couples, no families. Population demographics have changed. People are now making roots in Gold Coast. People are now setting up roots in Central Coast because it's cheaper than Sydney. People are moving out of Sydney. Even business owners are going, it's cheaper for me to move my business to Central Coast. It's cheaper for me to run. Business rates are less. There's incentives to relocate. So, ironically, actually, that geographic kind of economic stuff is different now than what it was 25 years ago. I think you'll find the Central Coast has got a very diverse economy, and a lot of people are moving out of Sydney, moving out of Melbourne, and they're looking further up New South Wales coastline towards Queensland. A lot of New South Welshmen are now living in Queensland because it's cheaper, which is why Gold Coast and Brisbane have expanded massively. That's why Townsville is now a central population hub. They're looking northwards because it's cheaper. And they're taking, if they are self-employed or got a small business, they're moving their business with them. Or they're setting up a business because it's more economically viable, because it's cheaper to run. Corporate tax rates. Sydney's like London. It's now getting too expensive to live and work. So if you're an entrepreneur and you want to set up a tech firm, you're not going to do it in London. You're going to do it outside London. You're not going to do it in Sydney. You're going to set it up outside of Sydney. Because office space, factory space, and enticing people to come into work when they're being forced to move further and further away out of the city. People can work remotely. I think you'll find that Sydney and Melbourne, people are moving out of these cities. Even though the populations are still going up, more and more people, once they reach a certain salary level, or they're running a business, they'll relocate their business or they'll transfer a lot of their business operations outside. Which is why places like Perth are doing really well, because it's a lot cheaper to live and work. I do follow economics and geopolitics and stuff, because when I'm not at work, I live on the internet. And it's the same in like the US. When I was talking about where free agents want to sign, when they look at a team to sign for, Places like New York will have that draw because it's New York. Places like LA will have that draw because it's LA. But if you actually look at the stats, people are actually leaving California, they're leaving Los Angeles, they're leaving New York, and they're moving elsewhere. Whether it's in state or out of state, they're leaving these metro areas because they're getting too expensive. And they're a business owner or they're an entrepreneur and they own several businesses. They're going to relocate that business with them, and they're going to relocate their employees with them. They might set up a new corporate office in another city and then ask their employees to relocate. And they'll give them a relocation bonus because it's cheaper to relocate to Idaho or Texas or Colorado or Montana or Nevada. It's suddenly cheaper. And their business rates may be a lot less to encourage investment in those locations. And Newcastle has diversified its economy away from mining and steel production massively. Um, and Illawarra, similar, has diversified its economy into other things. And then you've got Wollongong as a separate city, is more tourism orientated and research and university or education and research orientated industries. So some of these cities outside of Sydney are very interesting if you actually look at what their regional economies are based upon and what they're diversifying to, and then you look at the relocation of people from Sydney because it's getting too expensive to a slightly less expensive location, and then they relocate their staff with them. Yeah, which is why I think 25 years ago, I think your comment would have made more sense. It's making less sense now, though. Illawarra, maybe not so much compared to Newcastle or Central Coast. Um, this is where Gold Coast struggled 25 years ago with the Crushers, where they're now succeeding with the Titans. Is the demographic has changed, the city itself has changed massively. More companies, more tech companies are setting up, more engineering firms, research firms. They're now getting investment opportunities. They're setting up. It's more stable. People are settling down. Crime rate's lower than in Brisbane, for example, or in the Tweed Valley. People are settling in Gold Coast. It's a nice place to raise a family. Good climate. Lots of positive things, and you're seeing the success of that positivity now with the sports teams in Gold Coast being more stably run. Bigger catchment area for fans, bigger catchment area for juniors and local participation. So future players of the first grade side. There's a reason why the AFL put the Gold Coast Suns in Gold Coast. There's a reason. So I wouldn't be surprised if Central Coast does get the North Sydney Bears go up there and put the 18th team bid in, which wouldn't be out of the realms of possibility. They were interested in bidding on the last expansion process. They have already stated that they have a bid ready to go when the bidding process formally opens. They have the finances in place and they're ready to go. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, Newcastle and Central Coast, yeah, will have less opportunities for corporate sponsorship, but it doesn't mean they don't have any. There may be some companies even willing to relocate to these locations, and if a team goes there, that will then bring added interest and added eyes onto. Okay, they are generating income. Let's open up a restaurant or a cafe or a chain store nearby because there's going to be people in and out of that area on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Let's maximise the potential on people coming into our store using our product. So it could be a restaurant chain. It could be a chain of a bar chain, a pub chain, hotel chain. Could decide to go in there, and then that's when you get more business, more footfall, and then you see the local economy starting to improve, and that actually attracts corporations to then whack in a regional office when they see that there's a boost in the economy, and sport can do that. It's been proven. Professional sport has actually been proven to boost the local economy, so and attract further investment for non-sporting industries going to a location. A successful sports team can do that. Yeah, I've heard that there's a potential of a joint bid between Perth and Central Coast for a team. You either need one or the other, and I'm not sure Perth fans. There's a lot of fans in Perth of rugby league, because Origin does well, and when the teams in take games on the road, it always does well. I'm not sure they want to have a joint bid with a New South Wales-based team like Bears, which is based out of Sydney. I'm not sure they'll be happy with. They would want to go, this is our team, like Red. They want to go, this is our team, like Newcastle, like North Queensland. That's where you get a whole city behind a team going, this is our team. There's a good state league in Western Australia. There's a handful of players actually born and raised and played juniors in Western Australia, playing in the NRL and the NRLW. So there's a good junior system. I'm not sure if you have a joint bid that works, because the locals in Perth will go, well, this isn't our team. It's a Sydney team that's just playing some games here. It won't work. You won't get the locals buy-in. So when the games are played in Perth, the attendance will be crap. You need to have a Perth team where every home game is played in Perth. Obviously, apart from Magic Round, of course, and the grand final, should they get that far. And then you'll get the locals to buy in, because it's their team, rather than a team that's transplanted every so often to play some games there, because they won't buy in. Even though the um, the money men have gone, well, we've done the money side of things, and got the sponsorship side of things. You need fans through the turnstiles, because ironically the NRL is still more reliant on fan gate receipts than other leagues. It does need fans turning up for fan revenue, the gate receipt revenue, to make some of its profit. And Josh, excuse me, without the fans buying in, you're not getting the that revenue. If they feel that it's not their team where they can buy in, which is the debate that's been had in Las Vegas and Oakland about the A's, the baseball team, and the relocation. Is the Vegas fans don't want a relocated team; they want an expansion team to call their team. And the A's are like, well, we're losing our team, another team, to another location, Las Vegas, much like the Raiders. So they're like going, well, what's the point in supporting our team until the move officially takes place? The Major League Baseball League wants to move the team, but the Vegas fans are like, well, it's not our team. It's a team that we don't want, that Oakland doesn't want. The league wants to move here. So, and when you want to grow the sport, that's probably not the best way to do it. I would have thought. I wouldn't have thought that would be the best way. Gareth Widdop is now playing for Halifax. Obviously, it's new bit. Rugby league news. This is an interesting one. Yeah, South Island team, but I would keep it in the one city rather than take it to several cities, because again, you're going to have those cities go, oh, we've got to share this team. Like Christchurch would be the location I would put it, because Dunedin and Nelson or insert city here, Invercargill will go, well, we've got to share this team with 2, 3, 4 other locations. It's not really our team. Let's have a look what they're saying about the RFL and the TV deal. Right, it appears that Channel 4 are again in talks about extending or renewing their free-to-air deal with the Super League. And the BBC are also interested, because their deal expires next year about the Challenge Cup. And the Challenge Cup final has to be on free-to-air TV. Premier Sports could also come in. So yeah, Channel 4 and BBC could. But this is the problem with the RFL. They haven't announced. Um, they haven't announced the free-to-air broadcaster that Sky, under their current agreement, have to give. The season is like 2 months away. That's the RFL are leaving this very, very late. Obviously, Channel 4's deal has expired. BBC's deal is going to expire. The Challenge Cup, a minimum number of Challenge Cup games have to be on free-to-air coverage, including the final, and I think all quarterfinals and semi-finals. And they're leaving it very, very late to negotiate extensions or new deals. I think that's really poor on the RFL's part. That's not a good look. I've been very critical of the RFL, their board, their governance, and the fact that I think they all should be sacked. And they've made some really poor, corporate decisions, really poor decisions. So when we're talking about expansion in the NRL and where a team should go, who could have that 18th team, where we've got a 19th or 20th team, at least the NRL are, going about it in I wouldn't say the right way necessarily, because there's ways they could have dealt with the last bout of expansion better. There's ways I think they should have had 17, 18 teams straight away, rather than having an odd numbered league. But that's my personal opinion. I think they should have admitted 2 teams at the same time rather than 1. Personal opinion. People can disagree with that, but I think an odd team league does not work in the long term. The NRL knows this. So the quicker we can get an 18th team in, the better. We also need to expand the women's competition sooner rather than later, because I think a strong women's competition will also bring in more revenue, and TV deal as well. I'm imagining this, but the BBC and Sky Sport once televised the Challenge Cup final. BBC has always televised the Challenge Cup final, but I believe it was on Sky as well. But I think the Challenge Cup mostly has to be free to air. I think the Super League Grand Final should also be free to air as well. Australia does their Grand Finals brilliantly, and the viewership backs that up. I don't understand why the Super League, until recently, the Channel 4 the Super League was behind the paywall solidly. It does nothing to grow the product to a wider audience. And you just look at the attendances at the Challenge Cup Grand Final since 2018; they have been dreadful, absolutely dreadful. And people said when Catalan got to their second Challenge Cup final, it's because the French team's playing. Well, the first time they played, it was a sellout, so I don't buy that. There's a big issue with having the Challenge Cup final in London. We discussed that. And the Super League Grand Final should be on free-to-air TV. I think more Super League games should. I think it should be a couple of games per round should be on free-to-air coverage. I don't agree with the way the RFL have negotiated for a bigger TV package worth less money. That board deserves to be, well, in my world, they would be rounded up and shot, because that is ridiculous. That's ridiculous. They've shortchanged themselves. They've negotiated a TV deal with more games being broadcast, so that's every single game, for less money than the old TV deal. That is a joke. Whoever in their right mind negotiated that on the RFL's behalf deserves to be sacked. And they're wasting all this. Well, they've employed the IMG consultancy group to basically strangle the game further, with their stupid criteria, which, as I say, grades a League One club higher than 2 Super League clubs. Yeah, that League One club has gone bust and reformed all in the last 3 months. That is bananas. That is ridiculous. That is completely just words. The Newcastle Thunder were never a good side. They've never been a good side. They've always been crap. Yet they're graded higher than 2 Super League sides. Make it make sense. Honestly. They've never been to a grand final of Challenge Cup or Super League. The London Broncos have, but apparently that doesn't count. It's just stupid. Castle would have been to a grand final in the existence of this channel. They're not great. And look, I mean, there are opposition fans going, well, you should have done more. They knew this grading was coming. You knew the IMG were involved, blah, 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 blah. It's still BS. I don't understand how this benefits the league when You could have a fantastic, as I say, the London Broncos have this massive underdog season, do a Leicester City, win the whole bloody thing, still get relegated the following season, which I just find absolutely ridiculous. Whoever in the RFL thought this was a good idea deserves to be sacked. When it backfires, I can see people's heads rolling. But the RFL is the old boys club, much like the RFU. They're out of touch with the wider fan base. They're making arbitrary rule changes, which are out of touch with the playing base and the fan base, which is already alienating and angering a lot of fans. So you are threatening to come up with a breakaway rugby league competition. So they're already dividing the sport when they should be unifying and growing it. They're contracting it, mismanaging it, and it's absolutely shambolic, in my opinion. There'll be those that have a differing opinion, but in my opinion, I don't think the RFL are taking the sport down the right path. Look how shambolic the World Cup was last year. They could not sell out stadiums that didn't involve England, which is not good. The ticket pricing wasn't bad when I looked at it. It just got up in price when it was meant to take place in 2021 by about £5-6 per ticket, which I think is acceptable. Wasn't bad ticket pricing, but they didn't sell. There was a lot of empty seats. Not a good look. A lot of players complained about the Old Trafford playing surface and the fact that in Super League, not every stadium is uniform with the playing surface. So some of the playing surfaces are all over the place. The in-goal areas are not good enough. A lot of the NRL-based players were really, really surprised by how poor the playing surfaces were over here, how small the in-goal areas were, how the pitches weren't a uniform size that they have to be an NRL grade stadium in Australia. Which also goes to show how long it's been since there's been a New Zealand or an Australian tour of this country. The last time Australia played in the UK or New Zealand was 2013 in the World Cup in 2013. So it's been a long time, and a lot of players have retired in that time. So there's a lot of players who played who hadn't played here before, who had never played in Super League, and they were stunned by the poor quality of our facilities. A lot of stadiums not good enough, and that's what the RFL should be fixing. That's where they should be fixing. And also, the TV deal has been poor for a very long time. That's on the RFL. Rugby league as a product, much like ice hockey, could sell itself if properly promoted, properly advertised. You could. This is what I don't understand, how the NHL can't even properly promote the game in the US. Their TV deal agreements are shocking. But I look at the product, I look at the NHL, I look at ice hockey in general, I look at rugby league, I look at the NRL, and I look at Super League, and I go, I prefer the NRL. I've preferred the NRL for my entire life. The quality is better in Australia. It has been for 25 years. The quality is where I think we've gone wrong is putting our season from a winter season to a summer season to mirror up with the Australian season. And while that makes sense on player movement kind of things and contract, it doesn't make sense playing a winter sport in the summer when you need those temperatures slightly cooler to improve the quality of play results. It's too hot to play rugby league in the summer. The pace of the game is too fast. We are seeing a lot of fatigue-based injuries. Some of those temperatures you do get in the NRL, in the Australian winter, in northern Queensland, you will get 25, 30 degree days in Townsville or Brisbane. You'll get that. But the majority of temperatures are therefore cooler, and therefore you can play that higher intensity game. They're playing in their winter. We are playing in the height of our summer. And the last couple of summers, even last summer, which was very, very wet, we were still over 30 degrees on many days. How the hell are you expecting players to play week in, week out in 30 plus degree heat regularly on average temperature of 25 degrees plus on hard pitches? Normally in the summer, recently, it hasn't actually rained as much as people think. Apart from this summer was a bit of a washout. But even then, the temperature was still in the high 20s, low 30s. How does that make any sense? I would switch it back to a winter sport. Because it's not working. It is not working how it is. The quality gap between the NRL and Super League, even though St Helens won the last World Cup challenge, which I think was a one-off because of the weather conditions, it makes no sense. Our record in World Cup challenges and Super League clubs against the NRL has been woeful for many, many years. We have not won many of them. Now, we might win back-to-back World Cup challenges because we're playing late winter, early spring, when it's going to be raining, it's going to be cold, it's going to be wet, it's going to be miserable. Our season's already started, so the team is already up to speed, whereas the NRL clubs are in their pre-season, haven't played all their trials matches, whereas the Super League season has already started because we're that, with the Challenge Cup, we're that far ahead in our season starting. Play the game how it used to be. But there's a reason why the Challenge Cup final was taking place in late spring, early summer, middle of the season. Because they play the Challenge Cup in the old winter format. So the early rounds will be starting now. Revert the season back to a winter season. It is a no-brainer. This is what the RFL should be doing. Rather than bringing in the IMG and their pathetic criteria, put the season back to a winter season. Those at amateur level and grassroots juniors and schools play in winter. Most people in summer aren't really watching sport, they're on holiday. The Euros are going to be on during the peak of the Super League season. Most sports fans are going to be watching England playing in Germany and Scotland playing in Germany. They're not going to be interested in rugby. You're competing against yourself. Playing in winter, there's a lot of disgruntled rugby union fans who supported Worcester, who supported London Irish. Got the London Broncos playing in the Super League this coming season. Maybe you can look at those London Irish fans who play in the same catchment area and go, hang on a second. You're disgruntled. Your team's gone bust. Well, we've got this young, exciting team based in London. Really promote it. But no, rugby league is, we'll get the criteria out. Let's kill the game. Rugby union fans are angry with the rule changes in the tackle claims. What's the RFL got done? Rugby union's done this really unpopular rule change that's impacting the grass. We're going to copy it. It's fucking brain dead. The RFL board needs to resign, in my opinion. The IMG needs to bin them off, get rid of them, revert back to a winter season. Who knew? Put more games on free-to-air coverage, including the grand final, Super League grand final, shared rights, like they do in Australia, and suddenly see the game grow. Cannot see, with the current direction the sport's taking, in this country and in France, where the French don't like the French government has a weird perversion of really trying to strangle rugby league in France, even though it's a very popular sport in the southwest and in the regions. Us and the French governing bodies are just not up to scratch at all. The TV deal is crap. I can't speak on the French TV deal for Toulouse and Catalan, but on what their agreement is for broadcasting their games. TV deal is not worth pennies. And now they're trying to even force clubs to overspend money they don't have when there's a salary cap system. So forcing clubs who are already struggling to make money to spend more money that they don't have to meet the criteria with investment, which are going to force more clubs to the wall in a sport where we've not seen growth for a decade. Where a big club like Bradford Bulls, for example, have got into administration, where Widnes have got into administration. Bradford have got Odsal is a joke of the stadium. Widnes have had issues with administrations of two historical clubs that are very, very successful that are struggling to survive. We are seeing the lowest Challenge Cup final attendances we've ever seen, ever, which is a joke, by the way. So I just don't know. I don't know where we go from here. The grading system is flawed. I just don't know where we go from here. I have deep concerns where we go from here. Yeah, I'm just so uncertain with the direction the sport is currently taking. I think the NRL do it better. The NRL has problems. So does the AFL. I do think sports government, because the Valley Parade is not a rugby league stadium. The playing surface is different dimensions to what you really need for a decent rugby league pitch. And while it could definitely bring good attendances to the Bulls, they would have to pay Bradford City money. They have no money. They would be anchor tenants. They don't have the money to pay a rental on a stadium. Their finances are a mess. They do not have the money to pay Bradford City the rent they would require at Valley Parade to play games there. Plus, again, the IMG criteria. It's an older stadium. It does need a lot of development. Valley Parade is one of those higgledy-piggledy stadiums that's had a lot of, since the Bradford City fire and all that. There's been various, it's become an all-seater stadium, but it's a bit of a higgledy-piggledy stadium itself. It does need a lot of investment, but the Bradford Bulls do not have the money to be anchor tenants in a Football League stadium, which has been a Premier League stadium in the past. Let's not forget Bradford City were a Premier League club just over 20 years ago. Um, it is a bigger stadium than Odsal is right now for capacity, even though Odsal had a record crowd of over 105,000 back in the 50s for a Challenge Cup final. Problem is, yes, it's a bigger stadium for capacity. It's in much better shape than Odsal, but it's money that the Bradford Bulls do not have to pay as anchor tenants to Bradford City. So look, here's some money. Bradford City could cream them for as much money as they wanted. The Bradford Bulls do not have that disposable cash to hand to do such an arrangement. While it could work in principle if the arrangement was fair, Bradford City need to make some money somehow. They're a football club that are not in the best of financial states right now. Since they've dropped out the Premier League, they've had their own financial issues. They're at a lower level than they want to be. They obviously want to be higher up the Football League pyramid themselves as a football club. I think they wouldn't. I think they deserve to be a Premier League football club if thinking about where they were 20 or so years ago. So Bradford City as a football club are not at the level they would want to be. They would want to be higher up the Football League pyramid, and maybe Championship League One level as a minimum. Championship level, I think, would be fair for Bradford City, with a potential to we could go for a promotion push. But they're in League Two, and there's been mismanagement of Bradford City as well. But the Bradford Bulls, I mean, they're not in a financial position to be anchor tenants of a football club. They're not really in a position to be anchor tenants in where they are now because they don't own Odsal anymore. The RFL own Odsal now, don't they? So they're already, bleeding money to another organisation to play at Odsal. So, why they don't? I think Valley Parade just doesn't suit rugby league with the playing surface dimensions, and you would have to. I don't think there'd be enough space for in goals. The in goal areas would be literally tiny. Now, if someone wants to come in and invest in Bradford Bulls and invest in a new stadium at some point, or maybe buy both clubs and make it a Bradford Sports kind of dynamic, and invest in one of the two stadiums and say, right, we're going to invest in Valley Parade, which I think would be the logical option because it's a more viable location because it's a bigger stadium, bigger capacity. It's an all-seater. Compared to Odsal, which is just a crumbling mess because it used to be a speedway track as well, which is why it's got banking. Then yes, if someone wants to come in and go, right, I'm going to buy Bradford City and I'm going to buy the Bradford Bulls, we're going to make a lot of investment into Bradford City. We're going to expand Valley Parade or refurb Valley Parade, make it a better stadium. Then yes, that could hypothetically work if you had an owner or owners who were working in good cooperation went, right, we're both going to equally invest into Valley Parade. We're going to move the Bradford Bulls here. We're going to leave Odsal. We're going to, because Bradford City exists because of the split between Bradford Park Avenue, Bradford City, and the Rugby League and all that. It was a Rugby League. Why Bradford City so late onto the scene? Why Bradford Park Avenue are a football club? They used to be a Rugby League club as well. There's a lot of Rugby League links with Bradford football clubs. And there's a reason why Bradford Bulls exist because they're the original Bradford Park Avenue. It's weird. I'm just not even going to go there. But there would have to be a working relationship, which there's been a bit of mistrust between the RFL and the EFL over the years and with the Bradford clubs over the years. But it's like it's like Widnes are an anchor tenant of their stadium because that's council owned. London Broncos are an anchor tenant of Wimbledon, AFC Wimbledon at Plough Lane, for example. There's a few rugby league clubs that are anchor tenants in their stadium. Look at Salford with the situation with the AJ Bell. That's becoming an issue with they could go out of business. And this is where this IMG criteria and the RFL aren't instead of grading clubs, how about we try and support clubs and try and find solutions to financial issues and stadium issues rather than going, now we'll just kick you out of the Super League, which will then hurt the clubs more when they just don't get fans through the turnstiles and they can't get fans turning up the games, they can't pay rent on the stadium because they're anchor tenants. Yeah. When do I think Yorkshire will go? They have. It's called Headingley Cricket Ground. They have. It's called Headingley. I would say Bramall Lane, actually, ironically, is a very good stadium. And Hillsborough's gone through a lot of development. The New York Stadium, Rotherham, is quite a nice stadium. The new community stadium in York is quite nice for the level that's used at in Championship Rugby League and non-league football. Leeds, Elland Road is a decent stadium, but needs some refurbishment and investment. I would say Headingley needs a little bit more investment in the rugby league side of things. But Headingley Cricket Ground is fantastic. Would you class Hull as part of Yorkshire with KC? I would. It depends where you're looking in Yorkshire, really. I do think there needs to be some more investment in some of the stadiums in Yorkshire and some refurbishment, investment, and rebuilding done and reconfiguration stadiums. I would think the best stadium in Yorkshire is Bramall Lane. I think that's the best stadium in Yorkshire. It's the oldest stadium in Yorkshire. I would say Headingley, the cricket ground, is quite well classed as well. And saying that, Old Trafford in Manchester is in a terrible state. Terrible state. And it's one of the biggest stadiums in the country, but it's in a terrible state of repair. The maintenance is. This is where I think the Jim Radcliffe situation with him confirming he owns 25% of the club now. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when he and his Ineos group and his family take full control over the Glazers in the next coming years, what they have to do with Old Trafford and how they refurb it, repair it, and bring it up to a standard where it was 20 years ago. Because the Glazers have not looked after Old Trafford. There hasn't been that required investment into the stadium. The upkeep has just not been there. And it does leave a lot to be desired. Or 50,000 capacity. I don't think necessarily having a 50,000 capacity stadium is necessarily the be all and end all. If I'm being honest, it's what you do with what you've got and making sure what you've got is up to a decent standard, well maintained, good atmosphere, good transportation links, and is actually a good quality facility that meets the needs of the fan base and the community. Would be my answer. I don't think necessarily, it's got to be a 50,000 seater stadium, because there are some large stadiums that are absolute crap holes. Honestly. I think Anfield's overrated. I have been there. Old Trafford's obviously falling down, literally. The Etihad, Man City can't even fill that, even if they try and give tickets away. That's why it's called the empty Etihad. They pump fake crowd noise in to increase the atmosphere. They've never sold that bloody stadium out. Because the Old Main Road was iconic and fans packed into that, and there was a queue to get tickets. The Etihad, there's always empty seats. Empty Etihad. So it's always good having a 50,000 plus capacity stadium, but if you can't fill it or you can't maintain it, and there's issues with it, then what's the point of having 50,000 plus? You could have 40,000 and fill it every week and maintain it easier. There are some good stadiums in Yorkshire. I mean, some are in better condition than others. Some need that little bit of improvement, like Headingley, just get rid of that terracing to make it an all-seater, make it an all-sheltered stadium. The cricket ground has gone through a lot of redevelopment. It's fantastic. I think Bramall Lane is a fantastic old stadium. That's all-seater. It's a fantastic stadium where Sheffield United play. I think Hillsborough has had its dark days, but is an iconic stadium, one of the oldest stadiums in the country. You've got the New York Stadium for Rotherham United, which is very modern and meets that club's needs. And then you have disasters like Odsal, which just are shambolic and make Valley Parade look like paradise, which is not a great stadium. It's an iconic old stadium, but it's not a great stadium. It's not the best of repair. It does need investment. But when Odsal makes Valley Parade look like the Bernabeu, and that just looks like a mud bath and is just not fit for purpose, There's your issue. It should not matter your capacity as long as you maintain a decent stadium. You've got decent fan facilities, got decent transport links. Size of your stadium shouldn't matter as long as it meets your fan base's needs at the time and there's room for expansion. Has good facilities, well maintained, good location for transportation. It shouldn't be a problem. Um, if you've got a stadium and you can't fill it, a lot of empty seats, that doesn't reflect well on your fan base, your club, regardless of the facilities. But some of the stadiums in Yorkshire do leave a lot to be desired, not going to lie. I would class Hull as part of Yorkshire. They've got a nice stadium and they've got a packed stadium. There's that. But again, the community stadium in York is a fantastic, small all-seater stadium. It's very modern. It transport links. It fulfills the needs of the sports teams that play there. It's a fantastic stadium. It was really shown off during the Rugby League World Cup. Great little facility, great facility, good local links, very modern, and it fulfills its role. And there is room to expand it further. Should York City and the York, the York Valkyrie, formerly the York Knights, both those teams progress up their various pyramids and progress as clubs and grow as clubs, and get back to the level they want to be at. So York Valkyrie want to be a Super League club. They've already got their best women's Super League club consistently. They're the ones with all the centralised contracts, players on full-time contracts. Tara Jane Stanley, for example, is a full-time player. Just to drop a name there. And York City Football Club obviously want to get back to the Football League. So they built that stadium with that in mind. And it's a fantastic facility for the community. And it serves its purpose. Now, if you could get the other bigger stadiums in Yorkshire up to that standard of modernisation, all-seater, sheltered all-seater, refurbed, whatever condition you want to look at it, better quality, then absolutely. I wouldn't say Ellen Road is a terrible stadium, but it needs improvement. Bradford City just do not have the money to improve Valley Parade. It serves their purposes for now. They're going to have to work on that stadium at some point. But Odsal really is a disaster. There is no other way to describe Odsal apart from this needs to be demolished. It is an absolute joke of a stadium. It's a terrible stadium. There cannot be any Bradford Bulls fan that is happy with Odsal in the state it's in. And that has been allowed for a long time. Long time that's been allowed to decay and not be. When Bradford had the money, they could have fixed that stadium up. They decided to overspend on players, overreach themselves on the playing side of things. But had they actually spent a little bit less money on their playing squad, not a little bit less, but actually built that stadium up, they could have still been a Super League side. They decided to overspend on contracts, pay big money to players, pay big money to coaches, and not look after the facilities. The thing is, Bramall Lane works for Sheffield United, and it's a fantastic stadium. It's the oldest continuously used stadium in this country. It's a fantastic facility. I wouldn't want Sheffield United to leave Bramall Lane. And I don't think the fans do either. The atmosphere there, even though the team sucks right now, is fantastic. Hillsborough does need a bit of love, a little bit of TLC, but they've come a long way since the 80s with what happened with the disaster there. And they have come a long way with that stadium. And again, I don't think Sheffield Wednesday club or the fans want to leave that stadium. Now, they could do, but the problem is with both Sheffield clubs, they have bad ownership. So they're not really in a position to spend money on their facilities. That's a problem. But there's no doubt both Sheffield clubs could sell out week in, week out, 40, 50,000 plus. No doubt. Same with Leeds. No doubt. Leeds, massive fan base. Both Sheffield clubs, underrated fan, but massive fan bases, not really paid attention to by the media because they're not one of the big six, which is one of those wank things that the media comes up with to clickbait us into reading articles that really are just a couple of journalists wanking off to Man United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea. Man City apparently are a big six club, even though they bought their success and have broken the rules to buy their success. And Tottenham apparently are a big six club, even though they've only won 2 league titles and haven't won in silverware since 2008 because they wanked themselves blind because they've got Daniel Levy in charge and he rips off his own club. I'm not pulling any punches here. The media obsession with a handful of clubs in this country is ridiculous. The narrative they want to push is all Manchester, Liverpool, and London. No. Sheffield is a sports-mad city. Bristol manages to have 2 professional clubs. Well, technically 3 if you count the rugby union side, and 4 if you count the semi-pro ice hockey team. So you've got stuff going on in Bristol. Birmingham, birthplace of the Football League, with Aston Villa and West Brom and Wolves, so the West Midlands. Second city. Wolverhampton's a big city. You've got founders of the Football League in the West Midlands, but apparently they haven't got big fan bases, which is BS. Aston Villa Park used to be, the whole end used to be one of the biggest cops in the country, one of the biggest stands. It used to, just the old terracing, and the old plans for Villa Park back in, was it 1910? I found a photograph. They were going to have double-tiered terracing stands at either end of Villa Park. They were planning to have a 110,000 capacity stadium in 1910. That's how good Villa were back in the day. Obviously didn't happen, but that was the plan for Villa Park back in the day. Club that's won the Champions League, but the media don't want us to think about Villa as a big club. Apparently they're an underdog doing really well in the Premier League this season. Just cannot stand the drivel that the mainstream media just out every bloody weekend. It's pain. This is why I don't listen to the mainstream media. This is why I form my own opinions from what I see watching teams play. This is why I form my own opinions when I look where teams are in the league, and this is why I was happy when Leicester City won the Premier League. It just really confused the media. Like, what's this? Oh, it's a fairy tale story. No, they're a well-run club. They've got the right manager at the right time. Got the right core of players together. They were angry. They were motivated. These were players that were told they were misfits. They weren't any good. Jamie Vardy was a former non-league player. Albright had been released by Villa. Wes Morgan had been let go by Forest, goes to one of their biggest rivals. Kasper Schmeichel had been done over by Man City. These were players that had a point to prove, and they proved it. Man City went nowhere that season. Put it in perspective, Tottenham were chokers, and that's why they continue to choke themselves now. Look where they are now; they're choking themselves, even with Anga Postecoglou, the Greco-Australian who's really out of his depth. Look, this is what happens. You've got Levy's chairman. He will flog your best assets, and try and make money for for Joe Lewis rather than make the club win trophies. And they'll sign up for the Super League and then regret it when their fans want to lynch them. Put it out there. I have my views on the European Super League. I have my views on football. I'm falling out of love with the sport because, and circling back to what's happening in rugby league, I've fallen out of love with rugby league here in Europe because it's so badly run. There's a reason why I don't watch the Super League. There's a reason why I watch the NRL. Super League is terrible. The quality is nowhere close. And what the RFL are going to do is they copy rugby union, they bring in these arbitrary rule changes because they're panicking because lawsuits. All they've got to do is admit liability in court and say, yes, as a sport, we should take more care over head knocks rather than change rules. Because headshots have always been against the rules. It's just gutless, poor refereeing, gutless administration. They're more interested in their criteria than fixing basic fundamental flaws in the sport. Yeah. I'm more ranting in this video. Just how I feel at Christmas. I hate Christmas. Hate this time of year. But I feel I need to rant a little bit. Because football with the European Super League and the mismanagement of football, rugby union with the mismanagement of rugby union, rugby league with the mismanagement of rugby league, we're seeing the same issues repeated by different sports at different phases of their development, their TV deal, their growth. And the issues we were having in football in the 80s is what rugby league is having now. What's happening with rugby union is similar to certain aspects of football, certain aspects of rugby league. Clubs are overextending themselves. And that's with a salary cap. And that's with some of the wealthier clubs going, salary cap, we're not going to care. We're going to deliberately break the salary cap, knowing what we can and can't get away with for a long period of time, systemically, where the clubs that are trying to stay under the salary cap are just forced to overspend, can't compete, can't attract those good players. They can't offer them the contracts. They go, we've got to let you go, we've got to let you go. They can't build a team, whereas Saracens and Leicester,
we're established. We're never going to get relegated because we've ring-fenced it now. We can do what we want. That's the problem. So rugby leagues will try and ring-fence the Super League and bring this criteria that rugby union's brought in, which has done nothing to benefit rugby union. So they're copying, they're making the same mistakes rugby union have done. Rugby union, professionalism hasn't worked, TV deals a mess, all the money's in the international game, the club game's wrecked beyond all recognition. Clubs are going bust all over the place, including in Major League Rugby, which you would think would be profitable beyond belief. Disaster. Rugby league, international games a mess. Club games a mess in Europe, although they're really well in Australia. There's issues, but football, that's a mess from top to bottom, really. There's threats of breakaway leagues. Clubs are breaking governance rules left, right, and centre. The punishment doesn't make crime. There's multiple clubs under investigation. Yeah, I religiously watch the NRL and NRLW. I don't really watch Super League at all. I barely watch the Challenge Cup anymore. Apart from occasionally some of the games I catch occasionally on the BBC iPlayer or the TV. Rugby League internationals, they're a joke. The attendances would back that up. Not great crowds, even in Australia and New Zealand. I don't know how they're promoting them, but crowds haven't been great. Although the women's game's doing quite well. I prefer watching women's football, though, regular season, WSL, because that's actually on one game a week, is on free-to-air BBC. Crowd numbers have been good. They've had record crowd numbers. The last Arsenal, was it Arsenal-Chelsea, I think? 58,000 at the Emirates. And then Liverpool played Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, had a pretty decent crowd. Or was it Arsenal beat Chelsea? It was Arsenal beat Chelsea, I think, and Liverpool beat Man United at the Lee Sports Village in front of a capacity crowd. So fan numbers at women's football are going up. And in the NRLW, again, certain clubs are drawing well. Canberra are doing really well with getting a decent attendance home games. Newcastle Knights knocking it out of the park. They can't sell tickets fast enough for women's games because when they get the women playing at home, then it'll be double head with the men. Oh no, you can. You just claim you've got a TV license. It's so easy to just say, "Oh, I have a TV license." BBC iPlayer say got a TV license. They don't check. You can. The thing is, though, I think when I watched the Challenge Cup final, while it was gripping and entertaining because it was so close, that same morning I watched an NRLW game, and the women's Australian Rugby League game was of a better quality. There was less mistakes watching an NRLW game than the Challenge Cup final. The women played at a better intensity, better skill level, and less mistakes than men over here in the Super League. Just putting it out there. Just putting it out there. That is an indictment of where we are. The women's game in Australia is far ahead of the women's game here, and in certain aspects. The women's Challenge Cup final, yeah, that was painful to watch that. I didn't even do a match review on that. I watched snippets of it and went, this is painful. Because that very morning I'd watched, was it 2 or 3 NRLW games? I'd watched a couple of NRLW games and I thought, this is light years ahead of what garbage we're pumping out over here in England. And don't get me wrong, the women, some of the best English women are now playing in Australia, but don't get me wrong, they're trying, they're all semi-pros, they're amateurs, a lot of them. They've got day jobs. They have to work their day job, go to training, and then play on a weekend. They do sacrifice a lot of time and a lot of effort to play. They're earning a pittance. The games are light years apart. They're talking about every NRLW club mirroring the men's NRL and every NRLW player being professional in the next 2 years. So in the next 2 years, they're talking about every woman who's playing in the NRLW being fully professional. It's semi-pro because some are professional, some aren't. But they're talking about a full professional setup, whereas we've only got 3 professional players on contract at the York Falcon. Tara Jane Stanley's one, and there's 2 others. There's 3 female professionals in England. There's 100 in Australia. Just might drop that. It's separation is unreal. It's unreal. The game out there is worth over $1 billion. Over here, it's worth 35 million with a TV deal. You cannot compare it. It's dying here. It's going from strength to strength down there. Now we can argue the pros and cons of the governance side of things, because I do believe there is room for improvement massively. I'm going to see if I've got another drink. Oh, I don't. I thought I had another drink in my bag. I've run out of drink. There's nowhere open to get anymore. It is light years separation. There is no doubt about it. It's light years in separation. You cannot compare with. It's nothing against the players who are playing here, women's players. I can see more of them looking at Australia and going over there to play. The quality, they're going to come back better players. They're going to come back fitter players, and definitely improve their skill set. And they're coming back to a semi-pro, part-time, amateur kind of game, whereas over there it is all professional, in all but name in most cases. And some of these players got sponsorship deals, they've got TV ads, they're getting media commentary, media gigs where they're getting paid to commentate and analyse. So they're getting on the TV. They're getting a lot of, sponsorship with various insurance companies, health companies, food companies, car companies. They're getting on TV ads. Over here, they're not getting that. So it is light years apart, absolutely light years apart. Do you think an NRL Vegas style doubleheader could work in London or maybe Manchester? I'm not saying it wouldn't. We obviously have Magic Round, which they're now moving from Newcastle to, I believe it's Leeds, which is ridiculous. Again, RFL and IMG doing really well there by screwing over Newcastle and claiming there's no fans in the northeast and all BS. Even though Magic Round was, as a Broncos fan, I would happily travel up to Newcastle to watch Magic Weekend. I would take 3-4 days off work and happily go up to St James's Park. I've got friends who live in Newcastle. Happy to do that. I would happily travel to Leeds. I have no issue with that. But the stadium is further away from hotels, B&Bs, and the entertainment district. So if you are going as a fan and you want to enjoy a drink before or after the game and so go to a restaurant maybe, get some grub in you before going to watch whatever games you want to watch on that day. Even if you're going every day, you've got a further distance. Ellen Road is not a bad stadium, but it's not in the right location. It doesn't put fans first. It's a smaller capacity. It's further away from the amenities, travel and food and drink, and the entertainment aspect, the hotels. It's further away from the city centre, whereas St James's Park is the city centre of Newcastle. Couldn't make that one up. And fans were dismayed. They were like, "This is ridiculous." But they did this for the Championship Magic Weekend when they used to have it at Blackpool, and then they moved it. And they wondered why it didn't work at a new location. The RFL do not have a clue what they're doing. End of. This IMG consultancy they brought in, they don't know rugby league and they don't know sport, clearly, because some of these gradings are ridiculous. They're flawed. I fear for the future of the sport. And in order for the sport to grow, you need a successful team in London and you need a successful team in the Midlands, and we don't have that. As much as I want the Broncos to succeed, the Scholars have pulled out of League One, not sustainable. So we've lost a team. Well, we had 2 London teams in the professional ranks, we now have 1, which doesn't help. And we have no proper, real strong team in the Midlands, which is where we should have put the Cornwall Rugby League, should have been put in the Midlands, not fucking Cornwall. And that's the problem, is we're not. Well, I'm happy there is a team in Cornwall. That's not the first location I would have bet on. I would have definitely tried to back the Hurricanes or try and invest and encourage investment in a team in Coventry, in a team in Birmingham, in a team in Leicester or Northampton, wherever it is. While it is rugby union and football heartlands, you can still put a team there because this is where it's making absolutely no sense. We're not growing the game. The TV deal is crap. I don't want to rant anymore. I'm ranting too much. It's not what I want to do. I want to discuss, what I'm looking forward to. And yes, I am looking forward to the Vegas games. There's a lot of people who aren't. There's a lot of debate around those Vegas games. And are they sending the right teams? Did they send the right players to promote the game earlier this month? It's irrelevant. The NRL is still going, here we go, we've got a 5-year plan. And then at the end of that 5 years, we'll review and see how things are going. Because they are planning to do a combine where they look at American talent to try and go, we can get 1 or 2 players to be signed up and do a pre-season with a club. They did it with the AFL. There's a guy playing for Collingwood who is from Texas, who used to be a basketball player, and he went from Texas to LA, did a combine, and got picked up by Collingwood. He's now one of the top paid players in the AFL, and one of the best players in the AFL. I forget his name, but he's appeared on the Pat McAfee show, especially during COVID. He's a regular guest, and let that sink in. So I can see the NRL working in Vegas. Whether they long term stay in Vegas or they look at maybe taking games to Sacramento or San Jose or San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, somewhere else in California or on that West Coast, Seattle, Portland. They are making a long-term commitment to Vegas for the 5 years, and then they may go somewhere else in the US. They may take it on the road. They may go on the East Coast. They may go in the Midwest, whatever it may be. But without risk, there's no reward. And I think the ticket sales have been really good. Both games selling out. With the fact that I think 10,000 tickets went to Australians who are going to go over there or already living there. But that means 54,000 tickets have gone to US locals. So there you go. So that's more than 75% of the stadium is local. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. In regards to kind of Vegas startup ahead of work in London or Manchester, yeah, but the RFL doesn't know how to promote itself. So unless you promote it, find a stadium that can host it where it doesn't clash with a football kind of fixture, like will the Etihad or Old Trafford or Wembley or the Emirates or a stadium like that be available? The London City Stadium would be perfect because it's good transport links, and it has hosted rugby union before. You could do it, but you've got to make sure it does not clash with a football club or a rugby union club that's using that other stadium. So it's doable, but the RFL doesn't have a clue how to promote the game. The number of college football athletes that are lost from the game because of the draft, yes, a fair few of them end up in the CFL, which means they don't get paid a lot, and they would have to take a second job, a lot of them, because the salaries in the CFL are dog shit. But because there is no minor league equivalent, which is a problem with American football. There's collegiate, and that's it. You either go to the CFL, where you earn some money. Some players earn some big money, but some money, or you end up in the NFL, or that is it. Every other American football league has failed. So even if you don't get drafted, you can get picked up as a free agent. Some even go straight from high school, actually straight into the NFL, which is scary. They get looked at in training camps, and they're on PTOs, and then they go get picked up on league minimum contracts. And you can get some diamonds in the rough, but there isn't basically any minor league system, which is just ridiculous. But yeah, there's a lot of them that have converted to rugby union. Some have gone in straight to sevens. Some have gone into the Major League Rugby system and converted. So that does happen. The NRL is going to pick up a lot of talent. They do these combines. There's going to be players that go, okay, right, you're not going to get an NFL salary, but you could have a decent career in the NRL. They did it once before, but that was back in the 80s and 90s, where the guy played like 5 games. It didn't play very long. It didn't work out. But doing it right they can pick up some talent. There's gonna be some collegiate players or ex-collegiate players who didn't get drafted very high, have been cut from training camp. Who could be a running back, kick returner, and they're what you need. You need outside backs. What's going to make it? An outside back is what's going to make it. So a running back, wide receiver, and a fullback. They're the ones that are going to make it in the NRL. I honestly believe that. They're the ones where the transition will be easier because of the cardiovascular aspects. They got less weight. They got to move around. No, it failed. The money wasn't there. It was a disaster. The quality was crap. Crowds were crap, and it failed for a reason. It was a money pit for the NFL. Wasted so much money there. They wanted to use it as kind of as like a developmental league for players who, when they were free agents again, could be picked up for training squads and training camps and given PTOs and maybe signed. Didn't work. There was no kind of camaraderie. The players were just there going, want to make that dream. These are players who refused to play in the CFL. This is when the CFL was actually making money and had more teams, and they didn't want to go to the CFL because it's a different style of American football, and you get paid a bit less. They were still ridiculously clinging to their NFL dream, and it just did not work. Didn't work. It was shockingly bad. NFL Europe was terrible. There's a reason why it doesn't exist anymore. And there's currently this European American Football League, which is doing half decent. I can see again that's just the early seasons of interest, and when like I don't know, there's a rough season or two where maybe games aren't so great, etc., and it struggles again. The same thing's going to happen. I sadly foretell. Although with the NFL now taking games to Germany, that might improve. We have seen some German players play in the NFL. So a lot of British players play in the NFL at various points. There's a couple of Australians playing in the NFL, but they're kickers. But I can see with the NRL saying there's going to have this combine, they're going to try and scout American talent. I can see a lot of ex-collegiate athletes, not only NFL but rugby union, quality athletes, and some rugby league, because there's a semi-pro rugby league system, who'll be like, yeah, we'll give this a crack. There may be some high school kind of 18, 19-year-olds willing to give it a crack going, well, it saves getting into university debt. I'll pull it off. There's going to be people turning up at various, in their teens and 20s, late teens, early 20s, so 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, who are going to turn up to these combines who are going to smash it. Now, the skill set you need would say to me, the hand-eye coordination, you get potentially a rugby union player or a basketball player with the hand-eye coordination. NFL player, you're going to get for the physicality. The all-round cardio is a difficult one, but there's going to be those, if they go to properly do the combine and spend a whole pre-season in a training camp, they could potentially have the physicality and the fitness to do an 80-minute game. And the players they're going to get are back row forwards and outside backs. They will not be skill players. These are going to be players that you pass the ball to and you tell them to run. They're not there to be skilled. They're there to punch holes through the defence. Their job is to defend that line. And they'll do that. They will do it. The problem is when you get the kick returner, the running backs, and the wide receivers, the problem they have is they don't do a lot of tackling. They do a lot of reception of the ball and they run it. So that's where you've got to teach that tackle technique. And that's where you've got to teach them the defensive aspects of the game. They're all about the attacking aspects, the offense, as they call it. And that's the difference between American football and both codes of rugby is not only have you got to be able to receive passes and receive, collect kicks and attack. You've got to defend as a player. The creative players, this is what stuns Americans when they watch league or union, is the fly half, the scrum half, the dummy half, or the 5'8" half back. Not only these are your creative players, they're also doing a lot of defending, and some of them are big blokes and can put in some rather big hits. Just think of Andre Pollard, possibly the biggest fly half I've ever seen. He's basically an outside centre playing fly half. He wins Africa the World Cup final. Just put it out there. Guy's an absolute machine. You look at Johnny Wilson and Dan Carter. They actually started out as inside centres. You look at some of the fullbacks. Matt Rogers, who was Wallabies fullback for a while, was a rugby league player before and after his Wallabies career. Fantastic player. His dad was a fantastic player as well. Creative player. He could throw some hits. He could look after himself in a rugby. And this stuns Americans is when they look at a rugby match, they expect the skill players who create the plays, your scrum half, your dummy half, your 5'8", your half back, your fly half kind of players. That they just do the creating and that's it. They don't do tackle. And then when they realise these guys have got to play 80 minutes, throw some big hits, and they've got to cop some big hits, they're like, and yes, there are some rules to protect the kicker and protect the passer, but that applies to any player can kick and pass and get hit. Like even big props have been taken out late when they've done a pass. I look at it and it stuns Americans when you describe it to them. Doesn't matter what kind. They go league and union different. Yeah, one's 13 aside, one's 15 aside. One has the nines, one has sevens, and the basic principles are the same, but the actual mechanics of the game are different. But they're equally as brutal in their own way. And you try and describe rugby league and rugby union, they're like, what? And you're like, there's two different types. And when you play two different types, hurt yourself playing two different types. It's fun explaining to them. If anything, it's good publicity for the NRL, even if it's only 4 or 5 players playing Queensland. I wouldn't be, look, if the AFL can go over to a combine and now one of the top players in their league plays for Collingwood, it's from Texas, then I forget his name. That's what's really annoying. I forget his name. But the fact that there is one of the best paid players in the AFL right now is an American. I think he's one of the top 3 paid players at Collingwood. And he got his contract from a combine. He had to do a year in reserve grade, and then he gets called up to the main squad, and he's been lights out ever since. He's one of the best players in the league, voted by the other players. There's obviously the Irish Gaelic football players who've gone over to the AFL, both men and women, who are killing it right now. So the AFL's proven you can do it. Rugby union's proven you can get an NFL player and convert them to a back row forward or an outside back. The US and Canadian teams have proven that for decades. You can get a CFL, NFL kind of collegiate, kind of just below that level, and go, look, mate, not been drafted this year, you're undrafted, you're a free agent. How do you want to play some rugby union for a little bit? Give it a tryout, and we'll give you a centralised contract. Okay, they say, they give it a go. A European club in, let's say, the Rugby Championship, which is level below the Premiership, goes, well, we like this player, we'll give them a contract. And they end up getting professional contracts in Europe. They play for a bit. Major League Rugby comes along. Mason Cox, yeah. He did an AFL combine in Los Angeles in 2015, 2016? One of the best players in the AFL. Collegiate basketball player out of Texas Tech, I believe. And he did it just because a friend was going down. He was on the American football program. And he just did it because a friend was doing it. And they drove from Texas to Los Angeles, did the combine. He gets picked up and gets a contract. He impressed that much with his handling skills that they went, here, there you go, mate. Gosh, Collingwood will take this player. We will put him in our reserve grade extended squad on our roster. We'll give him a league minimum contract, And then they called him up because there were injuries, and he's now one of the best players in the league. So I think it's doable. If a basketball player from Texas Tech can be converted in the space of 18 months from a basketball player to an AFL elite first grader, the NRL will find. I think what they're going to find is more outside back talent. And the problem they're going to have is they're going to have to look at this player and go, this American football player, and go, right, does he just play special teams, or is he always on the field as a defence and offence? Can this guy tackle? Or can this guy receive a pass and run with it? Because the defending side of things, you will intercept, you will run the ball back. But can this guy tackle? If this guy's only been on the offensive special teams unit as a receiver or a running back, can he tackle? Can that guy tackle? He barely does it. Does he have a good technique? Because the technique in the NFL and the CFL is dreadful. Can he be comfortable enough tackling without the pads? Firstly, getting them on the tackle pads. He's going to have to do the tackle pads. Now, if they find an ex-Seahawks player who's been to training camp, they do rugby union and rugby league tackle practice with the pads. So if they find a guy who's been in the Seahawks organisation, has gone to training camp a couple of times, cut from the training camp roster, maybe mid-20s, and an ex-Seahawks player comes down, they're one of the, and if they, I think Kansas City Chiefs are another one who do a lot of rugby league and union tackle drills. Then I think we could potentially see that being a success. There are a lot of rugby league fans in Australia laughing at this idea. I don't think Collingwood fans are laughing at the fact that Mason Cox passed that combine, got a contract, and now one of their best players in the AFL. It proves it can work. Now, we can all look at the international pathway program the NFL has, and is it just a PR stunt, or does it actually convert rugby union, rugby league, athletic talent, basketball, other people who play other sports into NFL athletes? And we can look at the successes and failures of Christian Wade's, Valentine Holmes, Jared Hayne. We can look at that and go, eh. Now, I think it made Valentine Holmes a better player in the long term. First season back, he was all over the place, but his third seasons back, he's been fantastic. Christian Wade, he kept getting snubbed by England. Eventually went, sod you then. I'm going to give the Buffalo Bills a go. He did. He kept making the training camp rosters, never made the final roster, which I found surprising, but maybe I think his height was against him a little bit. And then Jared Hayne, obviously, his legal issues were the reason why the 49ers let him go. But he did actually play regular season games. So, but Jared Hayne's attitude and his general all-round lack of care and attention during fitness drills is probably why he got let go as well. He was known as Jared. People go on about Jared Hayne going, he's a superstar player. He had 2 good State of Origin series and I think 1.5 decent seasons in the NRL. Other than that, he was a general waste of space for Parramatta. And Gold Coast, he was hopeless and got a coach sack and made the team worse. But I always have this argument with NRL fans about Jared Hayne. He had 1.5 decent seasons and 2 good State of Origin series. Other than that, he was woeful. He was overweight, lazy, all his legal issues, constant allegations against him, which have been proven now. But there's allegations out in San Francisco as well about what he was up to during his time as a San Francisco 49er as well, by a couple of ladies who are not very complimentary about him. So he's facing legal issues in America. He's been a prisoner in Australia. But when he was playing, he was always known as the worst trainer, poor attitude, poor diet, didn't take things seriously, and he had 1.5 good seasons in the NRL. So apart from 2009, I think it 2014, he was dreadful. He was shambolic. He had 1.5 decent seasons. Other than that, he was absolutely bang average at best. But because he had that good season in 2009 and because he had a half-decent season in 2014, people are like wanking themselves silly over Jared Hayne. Guy belongs in prison for a long time. His attitude, he was an overrated player who had a poor attitude and that entitlement complex, as I call it, the entitlement attitude, where it's a privilege, not a right, to be a professional athlete. He thought it was a right that he was a professional athlete. He was entitled to be a professional athlete. And in reality, away from him very, very quickly with his legal issues, and he made the Gold Coast worse. He generally made the Gold Coast Titans worse when he signed them. He made the team worse. How can you make the Gold Coast Titans a worse team? I don't know. The only reason why they made the top 8 in 2016 is because Parramatta, his former team, he was one of the reasons why they were over the salary cap and they got done for their salary cap breaches because of his contract when he was there. During a lengthy period he was there, got docked 12 points, and had they not been, Gold Coast would not have made the top 8. Let that sink in. So he screwed 2 clubs over that same season, which is fantastic. He made the team worse. He got a coach sacked. You cannot make this up. He was absolutely dreadful when he played at Gold Coast. And people are going on about a season and a half before. He was fantastic. He had a half decent State of Origin series where the best Queensland players were not available. Let that sink in. Some of the best Queenslanders were injured and therefore not available. And Cherry Evans had a disastrous series. Okay. And they stopped the rot against Queensland because Queensland put out an understrength team. Okay. Then they didn't win again for what, 4 years. So yeah, then there was another. Then Queensland got strong again because all their players were available. Can't make this shit up. Then in 2009, Queensland battered New South Wales, and Jared Hayne had a decent series. Didn't win the grand final. And yeah, he, overrated player. A very toxic element in the dressing room. He wasn't very popular with his teammates. Could a reality TV show be done during and after the NRL Combine? It would be interesting. It'd be a way, especially if like someone like Netflix or Disney Plus were to sign up for something like that and really promote it in the US. That could work. That could definitely grow the interest of the sport. If you were to do like a Netflix style documentary series about Combine, about maybe an episode on each NRL club. Like Wayne Bennett with the Dolphins could be interesting, but it could definitely be something they could consider, and it's a way to engage with new fans. Look, while I don't agree with how Liberty Media have gone around the rules and regulations of F1 and some of the tracks they go to, there's too many US races. It's definitely grown the US audiences, which is what the NRL wants basically, is to grow the international audience by winning the US battle over the AFL. And attracting a new audience from America, because they know that's where a lot of the investment's from, and some of the teams in the NRL have US investment. They want to attract more of that investment to clubs with corporate money. A Netflix-style series similar to the Tales of Tiger Town, an episode on each team would be fantastic. The origins of the team, the history, the best players, the current squads, how the junior system works, how training works, following like a new recruit when it comes to the club, looking at the club captain, that kind of could work. The NRL Combine, you could do a fly on the wall kind of. What's this all about? What NRL players will go over there to be part of the Combine to show these players that this is what our training, our tackle technique is all about. This is what we do in training. This is the wrestle. This is the tackle. This is the ruck. This is the play the ball. This is what an 80-minute match looks like. Stuff like that. This is what talent scouts are looking for. That could be really interesting.
Tales of Tiger Town was a car crash of a series for the West Tigers, but it was really interesting seeing the dynamic of Madge, the pressure he's under, how the players were not responding to him, the issues he was facing as head coach, the disaster behind the scenes. Pasco, God, the guy's bubblehead. He looks like a beluga. That would be really interesting. I would happily, well, I already have a Netflix now, but I would happily watch with interest and go, yeah, okay, I can understand. I think it would help American an American audience understand um, what um, the league stands for, what each club, their origin story, what the fan bases of each club expect every season. The Newcastle and Canberra fan bases, for example, are fanatical, like the Viking clap at Raiders games. The North Queensland Cowboys, how 2/3 of Queensland, that is their team right now. The geographical area, that is, outside of southern Queensland, the Cowboys represents the rest of Queensland, and what it means to be a cowboy, what it means to be a warrior, and how that is New Zealand's team until the second team is there if the second team does go there. You've got the Melbourne Storm, the only team in the state of Victoria. You've got all these teams in Sydney, and then you've got the Newcastle Knights. You've got the most fanatical fan base out of the lot, I think. And then you've got the nearest team, the Dolphins, and then you've got the Broncos, and then Gold Coast Titans. The Titans did a 4-part series a couple of years ago with Justin Holbrook was announced as head coach for Fox Sports. That was quite good, actually. But again, if they were to do an episode or a series about the combine and maybe even look at the teams that are going to Vegas, plus a little overview of the other teams in the league, where they've got like, here's 4 of the teams, these are the 4 teams going to Vegas, here's every other team in the league, here's a little overview of club, home stadium, nickname, mascot, team colours, head coach, little overview of how long they've here's the 4 teams we're going to focus. Episode 1, Roosters. Episode 2, we're going to focus Sea. Episode 3, we're going to look at the Broncos. Episode 4, the Rabbitohs. Random Souths fan, because they appear at every major sport event. Random Souths fan. Even during the BLM riot, Black Lives Matter riots all over Georgia, there was a random guy in a South shirt when those riots were taking place. It was ridiculous. That would be fun. That would be really interesting to look at. I would happily watch. Happily. But yeah, we'll have to see what the NRL have been in discussions with, I believe, Netflix and Disney about a potential. They've been in discussions with TV executives about a potential documentary series, so that's not without credence or credit to discuss that. I think that's yeah. Anyway, I'm going to call that there. Thank you very much for the last 3 hours and 22 minutes. Really appreciate all the questions. It's been kind of fun this Christmas Day. Merry Christmas to everybody, and I'll have some more content for you very soon. So for me, for now, it is goodbye. I'm going to have a cup of tea, I think, and then I'm going to get an early night. But for me, for now, it is a goodbye. I really appreciate it all. I will have some more content for you very, very soon. Oh.